Good afternoon. Welcome to today's meeting of the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via YouTube and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can everyone please switch their microphone on when speaking and turn it off when they have finished speaking? We have had apologies from Mrs. Richards, and Mr. Jennings will be acting as substitutes. Can we first go to item 1 on the agenda, appointment of chairman, which is to note that Mr. Pearson was nominated as chairman-elect to the Environment, Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the annual meeting of the County Council held on May 15th, 2019. Perfect.
Second, that's right, okay.
Yep.
Well, that was quick anyway, thank you very much. Welcome for the first, the first one of the new term. Welcome to all the guests. Good to see such a good, handsome bunch of people from Leicestershire. Thank you. And the Specsavers. You can see them afterwards, ladies. It was okay. The next on the agenda will be election of deputy chair. So I'd like to invite nominations. Well, I'd like to nominate Paul. Could we have a seconder? Thank you, Jonathan. And we could record that, please, and then we can move on. I gather you've had all the minutes which were held 7th of March 2019. I propose that... Oh, sorry, I've just... a slightly new... Sorry, before I... Yeah, sorry, mate, you just told me this, didn't you? You're supposed to be here, Paul, not down there.
I'd like to move.
I'd like to advise the committee that the following... There has been a restructure within the highways and transport side of the E&T department. We've got a new assistant director joining us, and it's Mr. Pat Clark. Would you like to say hello, Pat? All right, okay. And I used his name at the briefing earlier, PAT, Parking and Transport. It's perfect, isn't it, Pat? So I thought you'd like that one. Pat is now responsible for highway and transport operations, with Ian Veers becoming Assistant Director for Infrastructure and Growth. Congratulations to Ian. I'm sure that's something you're really going to enjoy. Okay, we've done the election of that. We just jumped on that. That's good. We have question 3. I propose the minutes of the meeting be held 7th of March are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Are we all happy with that? Approved, thank you. So we'll sign those later. Question time, number 4 on the agenda. I have received no questions. 5, agenda item, questions asked by members, standing order 7, brackets 3 and 7, brackets 5. We now move that item 5, questions under standing order. I have received no questions from members. Number 6, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take urgent elsewhere on the agenda. I've been notified of no urgent items. 7, a declaration of interest in respect of items. We now move that we have a declaration. Mr. Jennings.
Well, thank you, Chairman. It's a question,
David.
actually. It's the agenda item 13, the Melton bypass. At the most recent meeting of the Development Control and Regulatory Board, of which I'm a member, we approved the first phase, and I was present and voted for that.
Yeah.
Now, do I have to make any formal declaration or just put it on record?
I think it's just on record, Mo. That's right, isn't it? Just on record. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making the declaration. And Dan.
Thank you, Chairman. And mine's a similar declaration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's excellent. We've noted those. Thank you. Now on to item 8, the party whip, according to the members' scrutiny procedure. I think we've done the declarations there. We are now going to item 9. So we move on to item 9, presentation of petitions. We've got a few today. So we go up to the first one, which is relate to save the 159 bus stop, cuts to the one, I think it's 153 and 159, and it's Mr. Crooks, CC of the Liberal Democrats. Mr. Crooks, good to see you. Grab a seat. I saw you sitting there. I thought, I didn't realise, I thought it was a relative, but it's you. Good to see you. So you'd like to say a few words, Mr. Crooks?
Thank you, Chairman. Let's find my notes. Right. Chairman, members, I wish to present a petition of 1,303 signatures concerning the possible loss of the 159 bus service and the reduction in the 153 service. Mr Chairman, I feel I must speak on behalf of the 6 villages I represent, being Newbold, Verdon, Palston, Osbaston, Nailston and Stapleton. And whilst the loss of the 159 will not affect Desford, which isn't part of my division but right next door, the reduction of the 153 will. Stapleton, despite being on a major A road, is, if the 159 is taken away, will have no buses at all. Over the last few years, we have seen shops, post offices and pubs close in rural areas, and the loss of the 159 in particular will isolate young and old from services and doctors. And I've just been given the latest figures on students that use that 159, and apparently it's 48. 11 from Balston, 5 from Newbold, 1 from Hinckley, 1 from Carlton, 1 from Shackleton. Those are the ones that are in my area, but there are obviously others that are in the Colville and the Hinckley area. Where am I? The students go to Hinckley College, they go to the Colville one and also go into Leicester on the 153. Many elderly residents use this service to access shops and medical practices, and without buses they will be trapped. I ask members to consider this petition seriously with a view that the 159 service from Hinckley to Colville, service in numerous villages, is recommended by this committee to be saved by the County Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Crooks. That was well spoken. Could I now hand this over to Ian Veers? Just to say, as you're aware, there's been a lot of work throughout the county, everybody here, regarding buses. I'm from Melton Mowbray. We have a number of issues. There is different types of service we can offer, and we know public transport is very important for the public. We're aware of that, but I'm sure now Ian will take over the mantle. And we have got Blake Payne, who is the cabinet member for transport, and I'm sure if he needs to, he'll say a few words as well. Over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If it's okay with yourself, we'd like to respond to the petition now straight away. As members of the committee and others will be aware, we have undertaken in the last year extensive public consultation into a new passenger transport policy and strategy, which was approved by Cabinet in October 2018. Whilst we appreciate the concerns of the communities, the authority does face significant final challenges facing the council in its provision of services, and whilst we were going through that consultation process, an additional £250,000 was added to the subsidised bus network whilst we're doing this work. The challenges are very great and are growing all the time. What the new policy and strategy sought to do was not only meet people's essential transport needs, but to do it in the most financially viable way possible, which may or may not be via a bus. All subsidised local bus services are now being reviewed against the new policy in this calendar year, and it is expected that the 159, which, as you may recall, when changes were made on the 22nd of December 2018, the County Council did step in and provide financial support to keep it running as it is until the review could be undertaken. That is now likely to happen in between July and November, when we will be engaging with the community, providing them all the information on not only the usage, but also what is on offer for essential transport services to be met to the services that the member just mentioned. We will then work with the community to see if there are other solutions that could be offered, but essentially we have to try and keep maintaining access to essential services, and that may, as I said, or may not be via a bus. Once that engagement process has been concluded, then the new service arrangements are likely to be brought in 2020. The Arriva 153 is a fully commercial service, and any decisions on how and when it operates are purely for the Arriva as the private operator. The 153 service changes do not constitute needing support from the council, as services are still being offered. Therefore, any representations regarding the regularity or the type of service should be made directly to Arriva. The County Council would only consider this against its new transport policy if the entire service was taken away, and would then look how to see those communities could access essential services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more comments? Blake?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to add as lead member for the Environment and Transport Department, and just to recap what the Assistant Director said, we did conduct a thorough consultation about our policy, which was adopted in October last year. The authority really values passenger transportation. We have a largely rural county, and we recognise that buses and other forms of transport are essential to mobilise our communities, and as such we have embarked on this policy not only to try and deal with the financial challenges that are placed upon the authority, but to make sure, unlike, may I say, many other authorities, that there is some form of passenger transportation provision for the county. So it's been done in 5 phases, as you know, Chairman. Each phase is being worked with the communities and the divisional representatives, the county councillors, and we are very aware of the demands in our communities for services, and we seek to actually provide the most efficient, cost-effective services and support the most cost-effective services across Leicestershire. So hopefully, following the engagement process, we'll have services that communities will be able to use and will be able to support. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Blake. Ian.
Yes, just one final point. We have recently received from Hinckley and Bosworth Council a motion they passed replicating what was in the petition that's been received. We will obviously be engaging with the district council as part of that community engagement and taking those thoughts on board. One of the offers that we will be putting out, any body, be it parish, district or local user group, do have the ability to fund over and above what we may be offering, and that offer will be extended out to the district council.
Thank you. David.
Thank you, Chairman. The officers have responded in the way you'd expect. The right sounds are being made, encouragement is being given, and I hope at the end of the day we can retain this service, this 159, because the point is that we're looking at a sort of a rural area which does have quite intense settlements along the route that Bill Crooks has outlined, and I think if we start to lose essential services such as this, it sends the wrong message out to the communities we represent. So I very much hope at the end of the day we will see this service retained.
Thank you, David. We discussed this a lot, and I'm sure the public here today, the transport is, and bus service it's a conundrum. I live in a rural area where a lot of people rely on that, but also we have bus services where we get 1 passenger per whole trip, and that's taxpayers' money. We have to be careful how we spend that. Has anybody been to Oxford recently? If you go to Oxford, give it a go. They've got demand response buses badged up, picking people up and dropping them off. So I think as a council, being responsible, we have to be innovative, look at every option so we keep the transport going and we look after, and I agree, David, we don't have isolated communities, but we get the best possible answer to move forward. No more questions, we'll move on to the next petition. Sorry, which one is it? Number 2, the second petition. Pedestrian crossing. Mr. Oh, thank you. Forgive me.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, you stop there. We've got Mr. Jackson regarding second petition, pedestrian crossing outside a primary school. Cool, you've got a... Sorry, is that the right one?
Sorry, yeah. No, Mr. Crooks is good.
He is, I forgot, yes. Sorry, Mr. Crooks, I realised. It's on my notes, but I got the wrong paper there. Fire away.
Thank you, Chairman. The residents have recently presented me with some photographs of outside the school. I don't know whether I'm allowed to circulate them to the members or not. Okay. I'll pass those along. Thank you. All right. Once again, Chairman and members, thank you for allowing me to speak to this petition of 710 signatures, which I submitted some time ago and actually spoke about it at the Development Control Committee when the application for the extension to the school was discussed. This petition has been raised by the residents of Newbold by leaving copies in all of the shops plus the Working Men's Club, and at 710 signatures means that over 27% have signed it without anybody pushing it or knocking on doors. The county have apparently carried out a survey to see if the crossing is required and advised there isn't a need. But with the proposed 105 extra students, pupils, I presume the increase in numbers and risk has been allowed for in this survey. Some 20 years ago, a young child was killed outside the school, hence the provision of a lollipop lady. But unfortunately, through ill health, the lady has had to retire and the county have not replaced her. Across the road from the school is the village park, which is the main and easiest route to the main part of the village. On top of that, the parish council has been improving the park on a regular basis. They've recently had 68,000 from tarmac to upgrade all the play equipment and put extra in. They've put a hard surface footpath across the park so that residents can use it in all times of the year to access the school. They are in the process of getting another 80,000 from the Borough Council, which has virtually been okayed, and adding to that, they put in 20,000 in from solar farm monies, which gives it another 100,000 to go into the park and provide more equipment, mugger pitches and things like that. So it makes it a real attraction to youngsters who, apart from going home that way, quite often, this sort of weather, have an hour in the park before they go. And like I say, I know it's too far back for the highways to take it into account, but a youngster did get killed there when we didn't have any crossing and didn't have a lollipop lady. I would ask this committee to take this petition seriously, as crossing the road is going to increase dramatically with the amount of youngsters that's going to go to the school. I ask the members to reconsider the provision of children's crossings, which would also help with the considerable traffic congestion at the school. And I've sent the photographs around of that. Because of the major increase in numbers, added attraction across the road and the loss of the lollipop lady, I would like the committee to have another look at this. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Crooks, well spoken again. Ian, I think it's your situation here.
Just a question from what was said. Mr. Crooks said that it was some time ago, and he mentioned that there was an increase in, I think it was student number. If a PV squared was done previously, maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago, 4 years ago? February. So it's quite recent then. That rather stops me in my tracks. What I was going to say is, if a PV squared had been done some time ago, then it might be some reason to do another one in the near future. But if it's been done last February, then that's quite recent. And my understanding is the PV squared is a national policy of looking at pedestrian and vehicle flow, that if you don't put that in, then you're opening yourselves up for other legislative action because you haven't taken the correct steps to assess a route's viability or crossing's viability. Am I correct in that?
He's asking you the question, Ian, so far away.
Enough to get past an interview question, if we asked you that, if you wanted to apply for a job, councillor, yes. Essentially, when we assess crossings, we also look at not only the need, as has been eloquently put forward there, but also how the crossing will safely operate, and that is dependent on the amount of pedestrians that will be using it and how drivers will interact with it. We have undertaken the survey in the last few months, as you said in the assessment. However, with the additional information, we want to make sure we check this again with the additional pupils at the school. We always assess all crossing requests that we receive against those national guidelines, because one, if there's a need for them to come in, we'd like them to be in, but two, we have to make sure whatever's requested, or if someone's willing to pay for them, as often happens at other parts of the county, that what you can bring in is safe. So we will bring a full report back after thorough consideration of all the points the council has made in the petition again. Thank you, Chair.
Can we go to Bill?
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned the school crossing patrol is no longer there. Is that responsibility of the school to provide it or the county to provide it? And if it's the county, why hasn't it been replaced?
Well, I could answer because we've had the same issue, but over to you, and you're best to answer this.
So we have been actively trying to recruit to the post, and we will continue to do that, working with the school. But as you know, and I know other members know in their areas, it can be difficult to recruit to these sort of positions.
Is that a fair enough, Bill? Yeah.
Ask the question.
No, it's
no,
good.
it's no, this has now been recorded. That's fine.
Just we had a similar issue that's very fresh because we had the same situation in Melton. A school actually recruited the lollipop lady, and then started complaining they didn't have a lollipop lady. We had to go through a process. So, so it was quite interesting. So it doesn't happen overnight, and they're rare to find people who actually want to do this type of work these days. Okay, which is sad. It's just not. It's changed, hasn't it? Okay. Mr. Curtis, fire away.
Chairman, if I could just ask, when they look at it again, can they take into account the 100,000 that's going to be spent on the park right opposite, which is a major attraction to young kids, especially when the weather's nice. You know, it's not just crossing the road; it's why they're crossing the road.
Just quickly, I'm sure, Mr. You're a member. We will endeavour to keep you involved. I'm sure that the officers will. They'll phone you up and say, come and join us and I'll walk around and have a look. How's that? Okay. Blake, over to you.
Just 2 points, listening to the question, the response and the subsequent debate. 2 points I'd raise as lead member. First and foremost, anything we can do as a scrutiny committee, as a council, to promote to the residents and the communities in Leicestershire where there are vacancies for school crossing patrols, we should do. If we can make as much noise as possible about this, because there are areas in Leicestershire. I went to an area in Hinckley, St Peter School, recently, where they're having the same problem. And the reality is a school crossing patrol person, which is a paid position and they'll be offered full training for, these people tend to come from the locality. It's not something that someone will probably do from one side of Leicestershire and travel at peak periods of the day or the school operating time to another part of Leicestershire. So as county councillors, even district councillors, use your community leadership role to spread the word. If you know there's a vacancy available, please pass the message on within your local communities, because the reality is the person that will undertake that role will reside in the local community. The second point I'd make in terms of the subsequent request from Mr. Crooks about can we take into account what might happen down the road. To my mind, logic suggests that in order to conduct the assessment again, a PV squared assessment, which will likely come out with the same result based on the actual data that's gathered, perhaps it's best to conduct that assessment when those works have taken place. Otherwise, we're not going to capture the impact of those developments that Mr. Crooks has just spoken about within the assessments. I might stand corrected by the Assistant Director, but if we want to take account of that data, surely the assessment needs to be done, with that data active.
Yes, we'll discuss that on the walkabout that you offered for us with the councillor, if that's okay.
You can't beat walkabouts. I think they're very enlightening. Is that all right, Mr. Cook? And thank you very much for the presentation. It's been very welcome. We now go on to item number 10. This is a response to a petition request for speed reduction on the B581 Station Road. The petition contains 1,457 signatures. Mr. Taylor, would you like to come forward? The seat is there for you, sir. Would like to present the terms to the committee. I've also received comments from Councillor, Mrs. Richards, Mrs. Taylor, and member Maggie Wright, who is a local member and supports the petition on the B581, and these can be found on the pink paper. Members, if you got this, yeah, thank you, Maggie. I will now ask officers to respond. So if you could just start. Welcome. It's sad, but it's a pleasure to see you here, sir, and we would like to hear your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I do have personal reasons for this petition and the speed limits we're asking for. The first of which is the collision my wife and I were involved in October 2008, which has left my wife disabled and even now still receiving treatment. The collision occurred at Stony Stanton end of the B581, and we were hit more or less head-on by a speeding driver who was a resident of Stony Stanton. This collision was recorded as slight, but personally, anyone requires extricating from a car by emergency services and requiring major surgery on their spine is far more than sight. So forgive me if I do not take these classifications at face value. The second reason is the death of our future daughter-in-law, Leah Ryan, on the 7th of January this year. I do understand that this is still under investigation, but the speed both vehicles are known to me. While they were both under the national speed limit, if the van had been travelling at the requested maximum speed at 40 mile an hour and using data from Euro NCAP, Loughborough University and the charity Break, Leah, or anyone else for that matter, would have had a 10 to 20% chance of surviving the collision, as the impact forces would have been reduced. Also, using this safe system approach laid out by the Road Safety Management Capacity Review for the Department of Transport in 2018, which has been adopted by Highways England and several local authorities, states that the focus on prevention and mitigation of death and serious injury requires predictive and not reactive approaches to risk. So with this in mind, between 2003 and 2007, there were 5 slight and 1 serious collision, and between 2012 and 2014, 3 more slight collisions, all around the same location as the incident on the 7th of January. Surely by using the safe system, alarm bells would have been ringing a long time ago, and a 40 mile an hour limit would probably already be in place, and a fatality might have been avoided. Again, using the safe system approach for Elmsthorpe between 2000 and 2017, 28 collisions were recorded, 24 slight, 3 serious, and 1 fatality. On a section of road that, regardless of house location and spacing, is a village, with hidden driveways, road junctions, humpback rail bridge, and this road is frequently used by pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders and farm traffic. The safe system may have had the speed limit set to 30 miles an hour, possibly before Clickers Way bypass had even been planned, by using a predictive and proactive approach to road speeds, road use and road location. Instead, we have a reactive cluster site criteria which only seems applicable to road junctions, and COBA, which itself without criticisms of its outputs, which is used by the DFT. With regards to the speed surveys carried out in March, they do give a very small window, to view traffic speeds. And if my memory serves, we did have some rain during this period. But the survey still showed speeds of 44 to 50 mile an hour, and this is the point. Speeds above 40 mile an hour cause serious and fatal accidents, and I use this road 2 or 3 times a week, as do other family members, and continually see drivers taking unnecessary dangerous overtaking manoeuvres, drivers travelling way above the speed limits, and with the summer draws in, these will only become a more common sight. This is why the residents of Elmsthorpe and Stony Stanton are continually complaining to their respective parish and county councillors. We feel enough is enough, and something needs to be done. That is the final reason for this petition, and what I would like to be proactive and put a proposal to the committee and the Department of Environment and Transport that I will try to raise the sum of between £5,000 and £6,000 to cover some of the costs to allow the requested speed limits to be implemented, which will allow for long-running community speed watch to be created, ensuring speed limits are adhered to on the entire length of this road and others in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'm just going to read the first paragraph from a member, Maggie Wright, which says it all, and this is how she starts it. I begin by offering my sincere sympathy, condolences to the family and friends of Lee Ryan, who sadly lost her young life in a fatal car accident on the road in January 2019. I also commend Mr. John Taylor for submitting the petition. I congratulate you. I think that was an excellent presentation. It's not easy. I do understand somewhat having a family member going through the same thing. So, but I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Can we go to, is it Ian again? You're the headliner today. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. The purpose of the report today is to advise members of the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee on our response to the petition signed by 1,457 people requesting the reduction of the speed limit on the B581 through Elmsthorpe and up to Stony Stanton. The petition received following the occurrence of the fatal accident, as you've heard about, on the bend and approximately 500 metres southeast of the overbridge, just for those who weren't aware, it's in the diagram. As has already been mentioned, this incident is subject to an ongoing investigation by Leicestershire Police and a coroner inquest, which is now scheduled for later in the year, not as in the report, for some time in September, but that date may change. As such, the Council is unable to comment at the present time on this matter of the individual incident and will consider the findings of the coroner's report once given, if there are any implications for the highway and its management. With regard to the petition to reduce the speed limit, I can advise the members that the request has been thoroughly investigated, as we all do with all requests, and the concerns raised in it. The B5881, as you've heard, runs between the A47 through Elmsthorpe to Stony Stanton and has a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit in Elmsthorpe, then national speed limit to the national speed limit on the outskirts to Stony Stanton, where it becomes a 30-mile-an-hour limit. Whilst the petition states there have been 51 recorded injury accidents since the year 2000, this 2-mile section has had 12 recorded in the last 5 years. The rate is below both methods used by this authority to predict accident rates and would not meet the criteria for further investigation. As members will be aware, we bring an annual casualty report to this body, whereby we show all the work that is done on a yearly basis, looking for those accident sites, both cluster and on length, in which we can do realistic measures that will make a difference to the accident rates on them. Members will also be aware from recent communications we are currently undertaking an initiative on 35 different sections of rural road in Leicestershire with a national speed limit where the accident rates are above those national levels that would be predicted. We use an evidence-led reactive-based approach because we have very limited resources available to us to deal with the many, many issues that get raised with us by members, parish councils and residents, many thousands a year, and we have to prioritise where that money is spent. Hence, those 35 roads in Leicestershire that are similar in nature to this but have a higher accident rate attract the funding first, where we would carry out those measures. We also have to be very mindful of the measures we bring in have to be realistic to those users of the highway, and so we don't create unrealistic problems of speeding where we have unrealistic speed limits as well. We have undertaken the speed surveys in the area, and there was generally good compliance with the speed limits, and the majority of the drivers are driving in an appropriate way to the road conditions. The Council follows the national guidance given by the Department for Transport on setting speed limits, and they should be said largely self-enforcing and based on the nature of the roadside development. Now, many people will say if something has a name of a village, then it is a village and should be such. But drivers will perceive the environment that they're driving in, and the speed limit should be set according to how they perceive that environment, so we have realistic speeds. Setting too low speeds can actually result in higher speeds. So it's a careful consideration applying the national guidance that we use based on all the available data, and that has been done in the review for these speed limits. In conclusion, it is considered that taking into account the nature of the roads, the accident record, the general good compliance with the current speed limits, that no reduction in the current speed limit should be introduced at this time. I would reiterate that the traffic incident of the fatal accident in January is still the subject of a police investigation and a coroner's inquiry, and as such the Council cannot discuss the incident further. I'd finally like to say, having many years of dealing with road safety in Leicestershire, our sympathies always go out to the families, friends of anyone involved in an accident of this nature, and it is unfortunate that we'd be asked to deal with things in this manner when we know that the measures that are being asked for may not have made a difference. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, please, members? James.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Taylor for your presentation, and my sympathies to you and your family. My question is not is a slightly more general one based on what Mr. Taylor said in terms of classifications of serious, slight, and obviously fatal, self-descriptive. What classifies as a slight injury? Because again, based on what if Mr. Taylor said, if you something that causes injury in that sense that's still there 10 years later, that requires you to be cut out, would also, to me, seem like quite a serious accident. So I'm just wondering if we're using this as a way of deciding where priorities go. What counts as what counts as serious, what counts as slight, and please, if we could have that.
Once again, the criteria for those what's serious, slight and unfortunately fatal and the time limits in which those occur are given by the government again. A slight accident is one where injuries have occurred and it's been reported to the police. In general, a serious accident is normally where one is required to stay overnight in hospital and so forth. And then, unfortunately, the fatal is within 28 days or so of the date of the accident. But we once again, we follow national criteria for the information supplied, and that's given to us by the police.
Thank you, James. Bill?
Yes, as the Collins report is not going to come out till later this year, would it be sensible to put this report on hold until that Collins report comes out? So we don't know what the coroner is going to say. If anything, it may influence decisions here this afternoon.
We did discuss it at the briefing, Bill, but I'll let Ian sort of explain that.
Of course, as I'd hopefully said when I covered in my comments, we've based the report on the current information we have at this time. Any new information that comes forward from the corridor and the police investigations will then be considered if that is passed to us and its implications for the highway. So if the coroner writes to us and says this is something that they have an opinion on, we will of course take that.
Is that all right, Bill? So it's still, I don't think it's still complete. I think we've got to give and take a bit. Yeah?
Okay, I'm just thinking about the 6-month rule. You can't bring it back for 6 months. We have to wait for the 6-month rule. That was all. If it stayed on the table, if the report comes out sooner, you can consider it.
Yeah.
The inquest has been postponed until at least September, so we won't be having anything further until then. Then it will be up to the coroner on how long that will take for the report to be issued. Sometimes these things can take some time. However, as I can imagine, this matter will be brought back to us if anything is said at that time.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I do really appreciate, and I know it's difficult, but it was good to see you. Hopefully we see you on better conditions next time. God bless you and take care. We now go on to the next agenda item, which is my item 11. It's another petition. This is a petition requesting action on road safety grounds covering Queniborough. This petition was presented at the last meeting on the 7th. Would like now to ask Ian to report on the petition and provide some feedback. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. You have a report in front of you, and the purpose of this report again is to inform the members of Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the receipt of the petition requesting the County Council work with Queniborough residents to develop a plan to address issues of road safety and the lack of facilities emerging from the development of a neighbourhood plan. Many communities are now developing neighbourhood plans, and I've sat in a number of those meetings when they've been done, and they should be focused on mitigating the impact of new developments being dealt with in their plan. They cannot, unfortunately, be used to address existing concerns, no matter how much communities would like that to happen, be they real or perceived. And that is, unfortunately, the nature of the planning system. What often happens when neighbourhood plans are developed is people look at their villages and ask, what would we like to happen in the village, and get a developer to pay for it. So with regards to us working, and we have many, many villages now across Leicestershire, unfortunately we don't have the resources to be able to work with parishes on the development of their plans. Within the report we've done, though, however, there is a great deal of information which we hope will be useful to the village about the village of Queniborough, the various traffic calming measures that have been introduced over the past 20 years within the village, including those crossing facilities where they've been deemed safe to be put in and viable for the need, the weight restrictions in the area, and actually that has led to a very good compliance with not only the speed limits, but also the number of heavy goods vehicles going through the village, and the very low accident rates there are in the village. Therefore, following assessments for the crossings which had previously been undertaken, and looking at all of the accident records, there is not considered there is any significant traffic issues that the County Council would meet under its criteria for funding, and therefore any further measures that would have to be developed for the area would have to be fully funded by a third party for them to be in. We have included in the response back to the Parish Council the details for how third-party funded schemes can be developed, and as members know from probably some of the debates we've had, those have to be fully funded, including all the resources that would be required from the County Council to bring those in. We'll await any contact from the parish if they wish to develop any other measures. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll go straight to James because James, of course, that's his here as a member. We've discussed this both at briefing and the pre-briefing of members, and I'll hand over to James.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for your response. I've got to say I was quite disappointed to read the report. The size of the petition, I think, speaks for itself in terms of the concern within Queniborough for the danger that does exist walking for all pedestrians around the village, but especially children to and from the school. The report, as I read it, doesn't do anything to address that and just talks about the existing speed measures that are in place, as welcome as they are. An example of that is the speed table that's outside the school. Now, the report itself talks about the fact that some cars stop there, some cars don't stop there, and that can cause confusion. And then the report suggests that a potential solution to that would be to remove the speed table. That suggests that the potential solution to that is to put a zebra crossing in place there. If we can, I don't understand why the existing speed measures therefore would preclude even basic sort of crossing measures such as zebra crossings on the busier stretches to make it safer for the children to get to school. Not least because, of course, I mean, we've got an environment strategy coming, clean air strategy coming later to this meeting where we want to encourage people to walk. And if anything we can do to sort of to make it safer for people would encourage people to do that, in my view. So really, again, I know the statistics do talk about the fact that at the moment there isn't enough people using those areas to cross to justify installing one. But the question again I would raise from that is, unless we install it, how do we know the demand isn't there? Because you know, the reality is people in the village, especially those on the Syston Road side of the Melton Road side of things, don't view walking as an option, because the reality is it is getting across Bartby Road at peak times is a dangerous, at least perceived dangerous, and it is a dangerous in reality thing to do. Admittedly outside the scope of this, but the reality is with more development coming, there's always the potential to increase that. So one thing I would ask is that the department, if respond obviously with that in mind for future development, to think about the effect on Queniborough, even if the development itself is in a neighbouring settlement. So so really my question is, what can we do? I mean, at the moment, the residents to me are saying it doesn't look like the county are willing to do anything to address our concerns. And I would say, what can we do? What can we do? Why can't we install it in layman's terms? Because there's a lot of stats in here that my residents, I don't understand. Why can't we put safety measures in place for crossings? And just finally, in terms of the third-party funding, I have been in contact with officers this week and said, fine, third party, understand, please send me the costings for this, how much? And the response I got back was, no, even if you funded it, we still wouldn't do it. Which, again, that seems to slightly contradict. So if we could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Over to you, Ian. And then Blake.
Okay. Firstly, let's deal with the issue, if I can, of crossings and where they're safe to do. And one of the places we're getting a lot of requests for crossings at the moment is outside schools, where you may have a number of movements during the day. And I know, Dr. Bremner, you've had this in some of your areas. In order for a crossing to operate safely, you need a sustained amount of pedestrian movements throughout the whole of the day, not just in the movements in the morning and the evening, afternoon, where school. if you have a crossing that isn't being regularly used, and in Queniborough, a lot of the drivers will be quite local. If they get used to it not being used, then when it is used, then they might not expect someone to be on there, and that can be unsafe. So the guidance that's given by the Department of Transport is about that amount of pedestrians using it versus the amount of traffic that's there. One of the other issues you have as well is once you bring in a zebra crossing, that actually gives the pedestrian the control over the traffic. And whether you may think that is safe for that to happen, as you can imagine, pedestrians then take less care when they're crossing because they feel they now have the right to walk out and cross. So then you get issues on crossings, such as zebras, because pedestrians are walking out, whereas before, where we might just put drop curbs in or there was a speed table to slow the traffic, the pedestrians still maintain and take care with their crossing. And that's what we want everyone to do. So that's why we are quite firm on only allowing crossings where it meets that guidance criteria for the safe use of that crossing in an area. That's why you'll have had the answer back. Even if someone wanted to pay for a crossing, as I'm sure you wouldn't want to put in something that we felt wasn't safe, because that would be very, very poor thing for an officer to recommend, knowing that it may cause more accidents, especially where there aren't any at the moment. So does that help you with the crossing? Regard to general third-party measures, obviously what we'll always do, and we've spent a considerable amount of money already on putting all the information, which hopefully is good for the parish in their report. If they want to develop any other measures, we normally give that first hour of discussion free to go through what could be done. I have to say, having worked on a number of the Queniborough schemes in the past, there are very few things I think you could do extra in that area that would be acceptable to the locals. Because as soon as you start talking about more vertical features such as cushions or speed tables, I'm sure a lot of local people might have something to say about that as well. So it can be a fine balance. But if the parish want to pay for that to be developed, we can either put them in touch with the transport consultant to do that independently, or they can pay for it for ourselves to do. So that's the way that moves forward. Regarding the development, which is where this petition originated from, doing a neighbourhood plan for an area is really good because that controls the development in an area. As you know, we are very tied to national guidance again from the government in the National Planning Policy Framework on what we can and can't comment on that impacts on the running of the highway when a development is made. We can only then ask developers to mitigate anything that is left severe impact that is left from their development. So whilst often we get asked to, can you get these things in for us linked with the development, we have to prove that severe unmitigated impact in order to bring it in. And obviously the effects of impacts elsewhere, say as Thermiston or somewhere else near to yours, can be quite diluted by the time it gets to Queniborough. The one thing I would say is if it gives you anything, Mr. Poland, Queniborough used to have a lot of very bad problems. It used to have many lorries running through and a lot of speeding traffic, which is why over the years quite a bit of investment's gone into the Queniborough itself, hence all the different variants of traffic calming measures. But if the parish council or local groups want to do more, then we'd be happy to talk to them, but unfortunately all local communities have to fund that if we're not doing it ourselves.
Okay, that was James. Blake.
Just to add, and to thank the Assistant Director for what is, in my opinion, one of the clearest rationales as to why the reports say what they say. But I just want to say thank you to Mr. Poland, because he's always very rational and balanced every time he speaks in council, and he's a great advocate for his local community. And I, feel his frustrations with him, and I sympathise. As a division councillor myself, away from the day job of being lead member for the department, I've made requests, and sometimes I get reports that come back that say whatever I want cannot be done. And it's only in the last couple of years since I've been briefed every day on the rationale and the reasoning behind certain highways projects and proposals and why they can't be done, that I've become to get a bit more sympathetic towards the department's stance in that we do work to limitations. Those limitations and constraints are set by the Department for Transport more widely, the government. And I think there's a presumption within our communities that we're, if you like, self-autonomous, we can make decisions, just do what we want. And actually, I find it as frustrating as anyone else that simply isn't the case. We do have to work to the legalities and the constraints and the guidances set by government. And I think the Assistant Director just explained quite well as to why we're not able to put certain types of crossings in certain areas. It's not because, as a community representative, I don't have some sympathy towards that particular proposal idea, but unfortunately, if we're to do that against the assessments that we've done and then God forbid, some accident happened down the line, we'd all be on, if you like, the spike and liable perhaps for doing something that actually the assessment suggests we shouldn't have done. So I think it's for the greater good that the department takes this stance, but I totally accept that as far as your community is concerned, my community is concerned, they'll be very dissatisfied with what they perceive to be a very unhelpful response within the reports that have been set. So you do have my sympathy for the content and the conclusion of the report before you. Thanks.
David.
Could we, in fact, be sent a tariff of what these schemes cost? If we are going to pursue third-party funding, which seems to be on offer quite a bit now, or that seems to be a standard response we're getting, could we just be told, in rough terms, what does it cost? A stretch of yellow lines, pedestrian crossing, whatever it might be. It would give us some sort of thing, it would give us some idea of what we're actually, the cash which would have to be raised by a third party, be a parish council or whoever it might be.
Thank you, David. Paul, you got very excited.
I did.
You've got the price list.
I think whatever something costs, it could cost $1 million. But if it doesn't actually agree with the criteria of PV squared or anything else, it won't fly. But I think it's important still that communities are aware of options around funding possible schemes and then work with the county council to see if it's a viable option to pay for. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds... Ian.
Yes, Chair. We do often send out those almost shopping list of measures, and we do give those caveats on where it can and can't be allowed as well. What I would suggest, and my director just suggested, is we update that information and put it on the members' news page, so you've got it to hand all the time. And we'll also make sure it's circulated around the parishes. The caveat I would have is, it will be a broad brush. It only takes one statutory undertaker to appear underneath something you want to put in for the cost to go up greatly. So it will be caveated in that way, but it will give you an idea of what they cost for vehicle activated signs, traffic regulation orders and so forth.
All right, we did discuss this, and I've had discussion with James, and a number of the petitions, not just this one, is we've got quite a few thousand people today from Leicestershire have signed petitions. We have to, and we do listen. They don't always get the right answer because we have district, national, state, or whatever laws and regulations to follow. But we do need to listen, and we do need to give feedback. One of the requests that I have seen is sometimes, and even I struggle with the complexity of some of the information provided, the research. And I'm a bit of a scientist when it comes to sport, but not to roads and PV squared and this sort of stuff. It would be nice that we could give some feedback and in a bit more simple, easy to managed, and hopefully we could talk about that in the future. And I'm sure Pat is looking at me, chewing his teeth, thinking, yes, I'm definitely going to do that in the future. So, but I think that would be the case, wouldn't it, James? We need to work with our residents, and we need to provide information so they understand it, so it's clear, because then at least they understand that we are trying to work with them, that it's not always our intention to change the rules or break them. We're just trying to do our best for them. Is that okay? James.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the reality is that we do operate within laws and regulations, but to our residents, it looks like computer says no, and that's what it looks like. Okay, and these are real problems. These are real people in Queniborough that have got real problems walking to school, and people that are concerned about walking around the village, and it's just like, and they'll be saying to me, and I guarantee you next time I'm in Queniborough, they'll say to me, does someone have to be killed before the crossing comes in? And what do I say to them? Yes. Is that what I have to say to them?
No, but I understand. It's a balancing act. We've talked about that today. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, James. Well spoken. We've got pages 45, 54. A new term is a bridge strike. That doesn't mean a bridge has gone on strike. It means somebody's hit it with a vehicle, by the sounds of it. So I think we've got Mr. Mark Woodward. Mark? Don't be shy. Come into you can join us. You can sit in the corner here, both of you. Make yourself at home. And also Graham. would you like to join us? And who else? Is anybody else? I think we've got you all in. And Mark Dangerfield. Pleased to meet you. He's got the clicker. Yeah, you want to introduce this? Yeah. Well, just before we start, Anne would like now to introduce the presentation. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Mr Bill requested that this matter be brought to the committee to scrutinise a high-level bridge strikes that we actually have here on the E5 in Hinckley. And investigate with the relevant authorities and parties involved in that, what's happening in that and what possibly could be done so we have a better understanding of the situation. As Chair's already said, we have colleagues here from Highways England, Malcolm Dangerfield, and from Network Rail, Mark Woodward, as well as Graham Compton from Leicestershire Police, who's been with this committee before, to take us through that. Very, very brief overview from me before we hand over to the presentation is the bridge is owned and maintained by Network Rail. It crosses Highways England Road, which is A5, and obviously one of the key factors for us, and particularly for Mr Bill as well, is when there is a bridge strike and that road is closed, the traffic is then diverted through the local roads and the impact that that can have in the local vicinity. So I'll stop there because there's lots of useful information to come from our colleagues who are with us today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Over to the presentation.
Okay, next slide.
You're the star of it. You're all right.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, personal introduction. I'm Mark Woodward. I'm a chartered civil engineer. 20 years experience working with bridges, design, construction, maintenance, renewal, demolition, across all sectors, private, local council, Highways England, and currently in my current role with Network Rail. And the area I cover, I'm the senior asset engineer responsible for bridges, structures in London North West and South, which is, broadly speaking, from Crewe down to London. I cover the West Coast Main Line, and the West Midlands and Chilterns area. So those are the lines running into London Marylebone. So I've got quite a big patch, and it does include the bridge that we're here to talk about today, which we refer to as WNS Bridge 3.
And I'm Malcolm Dangerfield. I'm from Highways England. I am also a chartered civil engineer, working initially through local authorities and then most recently through the providers for Highways England and then onwards to working for Highways England itself. My background was originally with structures, and I now oversee a number of asset engineers who look after both structures, geotechnical, lighting, technology, and a number of other different assets. Highways England itself is split up into a number of different areas with the maintenance of the trunk road network. And the bridge in question is located on the A5 in what we know as Area 7, which covers the whole of the East Midlands, the map shown on there.
Okay. Unfortunately for Leicestershire, I suppose, this is the only bridge that I am responsible for in Leicestershire. The way Network Rail is split up, we are currently being devolved into 5 regions. We're currently sitting as 8 routes nationally. I say London North Western is the route that I sit in. We are being devolved further down, and we're going to become North Western Central. But the majority, apart from this bridge, of all your structures are in London North Eastern. So this is the only bridge in which I've got a responsibility towards Leicestershire. And again, unfortunately, as far as Leicestershire is concerned, this isn't one of your maintained highways. This is maintained by Highways England. So that's just where it sits geographically in my patch. It is really right on the boundary. So this is the bridge we're here to talk about. It's It's currently signed at 15 foot, or European requirement is 4.6 metres, which means technically it's a low bridge, and that is anything that's less than 16 foot 6 or 5 metres, which requires to be signed to allow for normal operating vehicles to travel underneath it. From a high-risk perspective, it's protected by the regulatory signs that you can see, and the network rail signs, which is the low bridge banner and the chevrons that we put up. Those signs are roundel signs, which actually means it's unlawful for a vehicle of that height to pass beyond it.
I'll add to that to say the signage on the highways, Highways England's responsibility to look after and maintain. It is also our responsibility to make sure that the signage is correct for the headroom, and the headroom at the structure was actually checked last year in April, and actually the signage for the headroom for the structure is actually safer than it actually needs to be, because the structure's got more headroom than the signage actually suggests. So it's actually in that respect it's actually better. So the structure at the moment has got protection in place, which Mark will explain what it does for the structure.
Okay, what you can see there, it's actually independent of the main bridge in terms of the main bridge deck that carries the railway. It's what we call a collision protection beam, and it's fixed to the substructure. It's fixed to the abutments that hold the bridge up, and it's actually set at a height that's lower than a bridge deck. It's set 10 millimetres lower. What Malcolm was talking about earlier, in that the height of the bridge is more than shown on the sign. When you actually go through the design codes, there's around about a 3-inch or to 4-inch of tolerance, where you do various rounding of the heights measured, because the height isn't actually measured physically at the bridge. It's measured over a 25-metre curve. So you extend the survey 25 metres either side of the bridge, and you look at what the road profile is. Because if the road profile is on a sag curve, a dip, then as the vehicle travels through, the height of the vehicle obviously doesn't follow that same. It follows a tangent line. So the actual height of the lorry can be different as it goes underneath the bridge, depending on where it is on that curve. So we have to build in this sag curve tolerance, and we do allow that sort of notional rounding. And again, because we're working with metric and imperial figures, to get sensible numbers out on the signs, you'll only ever see them measured within 3-inch increments. Collision protection beams are put there to protect the bridge, and they need to be robust enough to withstand several bridge strikes. What I'm showing there is LSS 156 Landor Street, which is in Birmingham. That's a collision protection beam which got hit in January this year. It's unfortunately it's taken repeated strikes by very heavy container vehicles. Back in January, the beam actually failed, and you can see the crack section there. Quite unusual. First time I've come across that actually happening. We sent it away for testing, metallurgical testing, and it ended up being a fatigue issue. There was nothing wrong with the actual material that was used, the steel, the grade of steel, but unfortunately, because that was there to protect the railway bridge, we've actually had the road closed since January, because it's taken that long for us to get towards putting a replacement beam in place. So these collision protection beams are quite fundamental to the bridge, and I'll come on to that later. No, the railway isn't closed. The collision protection beam is put there to protect the bridge, which ultimately then protects the railway traffic. So I'll come into that in a bit more detail. So I think the reason we've been invited here today by this committee to talk about this bridge, it's actually the third most struck bridge in the whole of the country. Back in 2018, it had 25 strikes. Typically on the railway network nationally, we have around about 7 strikes a day, I think it is, and these all cause different issues and different problems depending on where they are. So last year, 25 strikes. It nearly always figures in the top 10 nationally in terms of the most struck bridge. March last year, there were 7 strikes alone, which caused a bit of a problem. So to you, Malcolm.
So it's quite interesting because Highways England as a whole, the way that we record incidents, bridge strikes are not recorded as a type of incident. We don't generally have that many low bridges on our network, which is dissimilar to Network Rail. But through the records that we have got, we know that, for example, in March of last year, there were 7 strikes. Generally, they get reported by the police. We know, or I've brought here a little of the information about what vehicles have hit it. Sometimes it is not even known, the vehicle, because the vehicles continue on their journey without even stopping. In terms of, earlier in this committee we heard about injury collisions and things like that. Generally speaking, vehicles that strike bridges do not cause any injury to people. It's usually, and this bridge is particularly fortunate in that it's square to the road, so vehicles that hit it tend to be damage only and don't result in any injuries. I stated on here that there are 3 personal injury collisions at this particular location, but the way that, and those have been recorded between 2012, there was one in 2012, one in 2014 and one in 2016. However, there's nothing to suggest that any of those are actually linked to the bridge itself and that they are probably related to other issues on the highway.
Okay, so this is the last recorded strike that we had. Well, no, this isn't the last recorded strike that we had. The last one we had was on the 23rd of April of this year. But this was the last one where we had the vehicle details. You can see, the debris on the road that's come out of the back of the wagon. There's the height of the trailer is written on the trailer of this particular vehicle, and it's also, there's a sign inside the cab of the lorry driver as to how high his vehicle is, and it's the driver's responsibility to check the height of his vehicle, and to use common sense and take the various directions that he does from sat navs. And I say this bridge has got a height of 15 foot. He's going through at 15 foot 5 inches. Well, he's never going to fit. But that sign in there might not even be correct, because that actually contradicts, I think, the what's written on the trailer, because he just hasn't bothered to check the height of his vehicle. So, this particular one, it was recorded at 5:23 in the morning. Our bridge strike examiner was called out at 5:30 on site, 7:15, and he's floated out of the control at 8:10. And that's because of what we call the bridge strike dispensation for this structure. And again, that's something that I'll show a bit more information on in a minute.
So in terms of the way that Highways England deal with the response, the way that Highways England deal with the response, we have traffic officers who look after our motorway network, but they do not look after our trunk road network. The primary function of a traffic officer is generally to get the work to get the road safely open as quickly as possible. But on the trunk road network, that is down to the police in terms of looking after the safety of the road user on there. Nevertheless, we have a control room that looks after incidents on our network, and they will send out our contractors to respond to incidents, to work with the authorities that are there to make the road safe and get the road reopened as quickly as we possibly can. Within that, one of the things that we do is we implement diversion routes around the site. These are diversion routes that have been agreed with local authorities as being the routes which are most appropriate for diverting traffic around our trunk road network when it is closed, either because we have closed it in a planned way or in these cases when that's an unplanned incident. In addition to that, Highways England have a large quantity of variable messaging sign around our network. You'll have seen these on the motorway network. And these are used to advise motorists in advance of an area when roads are shut. And these are regularly used if the A5 is closed, for example, because of an incident, that drivers will be notified of this on other routes around the Highways England network. One of the things that was suggested was that because of the work taking place on the M6, which clearly runs parallel through Warwickshire to the A5, because of the major works that Highways England have been carrying out on that route, and that route has been shut on a number of occasions, that has led to an increase in the number of bridge strikes. It is accepted. Highways England's contractors on that project did in 2018 use the A5 as a diversion route, but they carried out analysis on incidents that have happened on the A5, and there is no correlation between any of the bridge strikes and the days when the A5 was actually shut. The only exception to that was one where the road was shut as a result of a vehicle trying to turn round on the A5. I haven't got any information to suggest whether that vehicle was over height or whether it was trying to turn around for other reasons. The major project that we've got on the M6 no longer uses the A5 as the diversion route. That has been corrected now to use the A46, which runs round the south of Coventry and is a much more suitable route anyway, being a dual carriageway for its entire length. So that is the diversion route that is used by major projects.
So probably, how much does a bridge strike cost? Well, it really depends on the location and the extent of any damage caused to the structure. Routes into and around London, cost significantly more. In case you're not aware, Network Rail, we are responsible for the track and the infrastructure, the bridges, the tunnels, the viaducts, the signals, the electrification. We're not responsible for the trains. So, the train operating companies and the freight operating companies are all private companies. They're all external. So, whenever there's a bridge strike that causes delay to rail traffic, we have to pay compensation to the train companies. And those are the Schedule 8 costs. This was a particular strike at Rugeley back in 2016. This is on the West Coast Main Line, so the London to Glasgow route. The delay there, we ended up paying out, as you can see there, over £690,000 in compensation to the train operating companies. The repair to the bridge, quite small. And the only cost that we, as Network Rail, can recover, in terms of Network Rail's cost, was the £193 it cost to send the bridge examiner out. The actual, those costs there don't include the insured's costs, repairs to his wagon. It doesn't include for delay costs to road users. For everybody, time is money. It doesn't include impact on local businesses. Previously, I mentioned Landor Street, where we've got the road closed. The businesses there are being severely affected by the road closure. But it doesn't cover Network Rail's costs. The cost of the asset engineers actually sort of, reporting on it, looking at the cost of the design of the repairs and the management of that process. Those are non-recoverable costs. So WNS Bridge 3, unfortunately for us, is a low-cost bridge because it's on a lightly used line, in effect. It doesn't have major implications because the schedule 8 compensation costs kick in. If you delay, if that track was, sort of reduced speed or closed for 20 minutes, that isn't 20 minutes delay cost. That has a knock-on effect on all the other trains. And so I think that particular strike racked up something in the order of 20,000 delay minutes through that one incident. So this was what I alluded to earlier. This is our bridge strike dispensation. All our bridges on the network are categorised against bridge strikes. And we have, so I'll run through them briefly. A red bridge is where the bridge we know structurally is vulnerable to the effects of a bridge strike. So any impact on that structure from a vehicle could cause damage that severely weakens the bridge to allow it to safely carry rail traffic. So those are red dispensation, and on every bridge we have one of those signs at the bottom, and that's advising anybody who's hit the bridge to call Network Rail Control Centre. So that goes through to control, who then alert the signallers. The signallers alert the train drivers. Control also alert the on-call examiners, the bridge examiners, and the bridge strike engineers, and ultimately onto us as the asset managers. For a bridge with a red dispensation, all trains are stopped, and trains are stopped until such time as a bridge examiner has been out to site, inspected the bridge for the damage that's been caused, and spoken to an asset engineer to understand what the implications are for the safety of the railway.
Mark, can I just stop for a minute? I think this is amazing information, and I'm going to be asked this. We're really concerned about this bridge.
Okay, this bridge is double amber.
The questions we've been asked for a number of months has been this bridge at Hinckley. Mm-hmm. What are the consequences? What's going to happen when there is an incident? Hinckley closes down nearly, I gather. There's lots of issues. Could you give us some direct feedback?
Okay.
What we're going to do, what's happening with Hinckley and that particular bridge, if you don't mind.
Okay.
We'll move on, and I did gather there was a question about the prosecution. So.
Sorry, I was going to get back to you, so forgive me, but there is a process.
Yeah, and this probably does answer part of that question. So in terms of what action is taken, so it is down to the police to take any action against any drivers that break the law, which they would be doing if they had overheight vehicles. In terms of the costs of the incident as far as the road network is concerned, Highways England will take the details of drivers, and that we will look to recover any costs we incur in cleaning up the operation. So in terms of removing debris from the road, removing the vehicles from the road, what we can't do, as was already alluded to, is recover any of the costs of the impact that has on the road user. There is no mechanism for that to take place. One thing that we have done recently is whether or not there is any pattern to the type of or the vehicles that are causing the damage. And I think one of the earlier slides showed that there's a number of light vehicles which actually cause the damage. There isn't a general pattern that it is a particular type of haulier or a particular type of vehicle that causes the problem. So there isn't a specific, it is random. Some of them are major companies and some of them are individual owner drivers. So this is probably moving on to what more people are particularly interested in. So the structure legislation governs what we have to have in place for the structure. So in terms of the signage which is there, it is the law that road users must comply with the signage. And it's been looked at on a number of occasions over time, most recently in 2012 and in 2017. We've looked at it again more recently. In terms of the signage which is there, it is more than the minimum that is required for a low bridge structure. And here we've got the signage which is shown from the westbound approaches, which includes the roundabouts on the approach to the structure. And also from the eastbound side. We know that it is signed from the M69, so the slip roads from the M69 are signed so that it is quite clear what the signage is there, so that we've got all the statutory signage in place. In addition to that, on the approach to the structure, there are a number of vehicle-activated signs. So these are designed so that they detect the height of vehicles, and they flash up a warning to overheight vehicles when they're approaching the structure, advising them that they are overheight. These were initially installed in, I think it was 2009, and they were refurbished in, sorry, I'll go back, it was before that. They were refurbished in, no, they were installed in 2009, and they were refurbished around 2013. So some of the problems that we have with this are that there isn't an alternative route signed for the bridge. Strictly when you have a low headroom structure, there should be an alternative route signed for overheight vehicles. And this is one thing that this structure doesn't have. Now, arguably that would involve actually signing overheight vehicles through the local road network, which is probably one of the reasons why it doesn't actually exist in this location, because we don't want people to do that. What we want people to do is to turn around and then use the strategic road network to go around the structure. And to provide that level of signage around the motorway network also doesn't work, because there may be vehicles that are over height which can't use the motorway network. So it's very difficult to provide that level of additional signage to divert vehicles that are over height around it. Another one of the problems that we've got is that there isn't any signage in the broader. If we extend out from the local place with the signs, which are indicated on there by the red dots, if we move to the south where we've got Lutterworth and there's all the various industrial parks down there and warehousing, there's no signage from down there advising that the A5 has low headrooms on it. Equally, on the west of the structure, there is nothing on the until you get close to it. So there's nothing from Atherstone or from Tamworth in the west where the M42 is. One of the other problems that we've noticed is that there is an awful lot of other signage in the location. And it's an understood factor that road users can only take in so much information at any one point in time. So the fact that we've got a lot of busy signage in this location with lots of other road network, there are a lot of warehouses and other factors in this location which will contribute to the fact that maybe drivers are not noticing the statutory signs for the heights, even though they are there. And it does lead to some of the questioning which has happened in previous studies as to whether additional signage actually helps. Because if you put in additional signage, it's just adding to the weight of signage that road users have got to take in. We also have the vehicle activated signs, and it is hoped that some service is going to take place on those later in the summer. The technology there is, for those vehicle activated signs, we believe is unreliable, but there is no, it doesn't have any direct reporting mechanism. They have to be tested on site, and the only way to test them on site is to have vehicles actually at the location to test them. And to do that, we have to close lanes on the road, and it can only be done at night. So it's a bit difficult. We get reports from various sources telling us that the signs have activated when they shouldn't, or that the signs didn't activate when they should have done. It's very difficult for us to prove or disprove whether that is the case, because it doesn't do any natural reporting itself. So what are we doing about it?
So what are Network Rail doing? Or doing to help? We run we've been running a series of national media campaigns, because primarily the issues arise with lorry drivers, and it's trying to get the education across to those. With various images tested as part of market research. The lorries caught in limbo is the current campaign. We do targeted campaigns to different sort of main leaders in the haulage industry. Some of the big logistics companies. We go and meet them personally. We write letters to MPs in bridge-like hotspots to see if they've got more knowledge of what's happening in the local area. I say because we're quite national. And we're also raising the issue with insurance companies, who ultimately are the ones who are going to be paying out. But ultimately it's coming down really to trying to get the message out there to the lorry drivers, that they need to wise up, and that they need to measure the heights of their vehicles.
Can you just wait for a minute there, Mark? Why? Just a few questions, and can I go to some questions because I've got people waiting. You're Network Rail, correct?
Yep.
Why is it your responsibility to educate drivers when we've got highways? I don't understand. Why isn't highways? The other question that I know somebody will ask, and we'll ask it now, I think you can ask the prosecution one. I'm sure they will be prosecuted. You did say that. There is some prosecutions. I'm sure the police will. And I guess that we're still getting strikes, so obviously, as it's been mentioned a number of times at Scrutiny, some of the things that we're putting into place and strategies aren't necessarily working, are they? If it's the fourth most hit bridge in the UK.
Okay, why is Network Rail interested? Well, it costs money. A bridge strike, not only does it cost money to Network Rail, it costs money to everybody else who's affected. But it also causes damage. At the end of the day, Network Rail is a victim with the bridge strike. It's our infrastructure that's getting damaged and getting hurt, and we have to mend it. So we have to go out there and repair it, and that's taxpayers' money. Every time we are a taxpayer-funded organisation. We are part of the government in that respect. So it costs us money. It costs you money. So in terms of the impact it has on our structures and impact on our passengers, then we see it as part of our responsibility to go out there and try and act on people to not hit our bridges.
Yeah, I understand that, but normally the education comes from highways. I mean, I do understand the signage, Malcolm. That is an issue, and I think all of us agree here, members, will be nothing worse. You drive somewhere that's nice, and then you've got a million signs. I think it's, there's just sometimes too much signage. You said that you can only take in so much, but the bridge is still being hit on a regular basis. So, we need to sort of mitigate the problem. I just wonder, is there anything else we can do?
Yeah, sorry, I will actually continue, but I will. The point about the education, Highways England have also got a campaign, which I'm not sure when it is due to come out, but it is again to do with lorry strikes with structures. Highways England have a lesser problem than Network Rail because the vast majority of our network is newer, and we have very few across the whole of Highways England's network low bridges. We are fortunate in that respect. We still get bridge strikes, and quite often by vehicles that are actually that hit bridges that are not signed, so they are above the statutory minimum headroom. We have that as our own problem. I will move on because some of this will probably answer some of the questions. So, I mean, some of this is looking backwards. I mean, what we've done in the past to try and resolve this problem, there were studies in the 2000s that looked at improving the headroom. I suppose the ideal solution here, the one which would solve all of the problems, would be to either raise the level of the railway, lower the level of the road, or build a bypass around it. These have been looked at in the past. You know, they're not, you know, it's accepted that they should be duly considered. There are significant restrictions on raising the level of the railway, as I'm sure we could talk about, and lowering the level of the road as well. The challenges that I could talk about in terms of lowering the road, it becomes a problem from a drainage perspective. It also would normally require the complete reconstruction of the bridge because it impacts on the foundations of the existing structure. So that it's not a straightforward task, and would be extremely time consuming and would result in the closure of the A5 for a lengthy period of time whilst the work was actually carried out. So studies have been undertaken here, and it was through these studies in the 2000s that the vehicle activated signs were installed at the structure. A further study in 2012, whilst it looked at the signage, it decided that improvements could be made to that. So improvements were made in 2014 to the signage for the structure. And there have been previously considered options listed up there in terms of whether or not traffic lights could be used to actually prevent vehicles from continuing on their journey, again tied to a vehicle activated traffic signals where they're looking at the height of vehicles as they travel along the road, whether there are stop signs, whether you project signs onto water. There's a number of technical solutions that have been considered, but again, it has to be fitted into the context of the environment in which it's sat. It has to be fitted into the context of the budgetary constraints that there actually are. It's not lost on us that this bridge causes us a headache on a regular basis. It's not just the communities that it causes a problem to, it is our road network that it causes a problem to. So there are a number of different options, and there are studies going on at the moment. There are a number of options that Network Rail have considered for other locations. I don't know, Mark, whether you want to talk about those particular ones.
Well, yeah, interesting because this vehicle has already got vehicle activated signs on the approaches to it, and Malcolm's talked about the sort of the amount of signage that there is and the adequacy of that signage in accordance with the guidelines. On other routes, on other roads, we're not quite so fortunate. This is a bridge down in Northamptonshire where we were getting an awful lot of repeated strikes, and we put out there these mobile VMS units. And the rental cost of those for 6 months came in at around about £50,000. So that's a 6-month rental. And what we actually saw there was that we were averaging 6 strikes a year at this particular bridge, and having put those signs in there, in 6 months we had 1 strike. So they still don't stop bridge strikes, but they do seem to give that extra sort of information to the driver. But as I say, if they're already out there, then there's putting in these closer to the structure, we'll be interested to see. We might be interested to see what happens with that.
So currently, there is a study going on at the moment to consider whether our turnaround facilities could be put in either side of the structure. Now, that would allow vehicles that are over height, when they get to the point of effectively no return, to make a U-turn and return back along the A5. Depending on how they were designed, they would form a better physical restriction to the road, but again do not prevent vehicles from continuing along the route and are still reliant upon drivers understanding the heights of their vehicles, which was seen from the earlier photographs. You know, hauliers have got it written in their cabs and they've got it written on the trailers, and they're still driving underneath a structure that is low height. So whether or not providing turnaround facilities will actually prevent it or not, it's still reliant on human behaviour to make that happen. But that's being looked at. It's also being discussed with some of the proposed developers that look to build in this area. They're quite amenable to working with Highways England in terms of whatever those developments might be, to help fund anything that any improvements in this location. That's particularly prevalent because one of the reasons that we have increased lorry vehicles along the A5 is because of the number of industrial developments that have built up along the route. And it's obviously in the interest of those, the various companies that sit within those developments, that their hauliers don't use this route. As I said before, there are various things that can be used to highlight to road users that there is a restriction. There are various things that can be put in place that make it easier for those road users to turn around. But all of those still rely upon the road users actually driving with appropriate due care and attention and appropriate to the size of their vehicles. And that is where, you know, we mentioned about the education piece, which is a national education piece about to hauliers. The only other way around that is, diversion, complete reconstruction of the A5 around the bridge, or the major disruption that it would cause to either lower the road or raise the bridge.
Malcolm, good idea. If you drive the A5, it can be bonkers road. We're running out of time now because we've got a fair bit more to go through. Could you just do a quick summary, both of you?
You are fortunate because I've come to the last bit, which is the
funding.
Timing, it was very good for timing. So as I come to the end, yes, there are limited options and there is limited funding. At the moment, we are at the end of what is known as our roads investment period number 1, and all of the funding within that is allocated to schemes of appropriate priorities. We prioritise things in the same way that Leicestershire prioritise their works. Exactly how it will sit within the next funding period, which starts from 2020 onwards, again, most things are dependent upon the benefits cost ratio that they will give. And incidents that just have a vehicle damage generally score very, very low. And unfortunately, that is where this bridge will generally always sit in terms of the priorities on our network. It's not, it causes damage and disruption, but it doesn't directly cause any injuries.
We'll ask questions. I'll let you finish up a bit, Mark. Max, over to you.
If I could just ask a couple of very quick questions, I think. Signage has been covered. Obviously, that needs to be improved.
Can I just ask about signage, though? What interests me, and I'm sure a lot of members here and the public will, a lot of the trucks driving through the UK are not English. They're from different parts of the world.
That was my question.
See, I've read your mind, you see.
Yeah. What I was about to say was, you said that there's no particular haulier or type of haulier, presumably. We are working in a global economy, if not a European economy. Is that a factor, and is there a case for signage in different languages? Thank you.
Okay, so it's an interesting one. I brought up the fact that we've looked at the vehicle strikes, and there isn't any apparent pattern to the vehicles that hit the bridge. In terms of European lorries using our road network, so the law states that all of our bridges, when they have got a low headroom, must be signed in imperial. That is the law. However, where it is a route of national importance, then the signage should also be in metric. And this structure has both the imperial and the metric signing for it. So it is covered from that perspective, and that is how it's captured.
Dan will ask a question saying, just interesting though, from your stats, quite a high percentage of the strikes, the vehicles carry on driving. So your data would be not fully representative of the actual strikes, correct? That's all right, you don't have to respond, but because I know I'm right. Sorry about that. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to think to be tactful, because I've sat through a presentation and I don't know whether I'm in more despair. There's a bridge there for how many years? There's a road there for how many years? It's receiving regular strikes, and I'm just sat listening, bewildered in what real strategy you've got. And the answer is probably none, because really everything has a reason and everything can have an answer. And I've followed both gentlemen presenters, and I'm still sitting here thinking, well, I'm not sure really. What are they going to do? Divert it, go under it, go over it? What are they going to do? Clearly, there needs to be a strategy. Your talk was very long and lengthy and involved lots of this and lots of that, and I lost my way many times. I needed signage to get back on track. But really, we want proper thought-out strategies and answers. Not a reason why you're here. We want a reason why we want to move away quickly and get a resolve. And I didn't hear that at all, Mr. Chairman, so I apologise.
Thank you, Dan. It's different. It is. I do appreciate the presentation. I think it was detailed, and it's been very educational. But it's not an easy answer. We know that. David.
First of all, Chairman, can I thank the officers for putting together such a thorough report. This is something I've been waiting for now for far too long. It's very easy to exaggerate problems, but when you actually see it in black and white, I mean, I've referred to it as once a fortnight because I know once a fortnight it happens, and I do wonder whether I'm personally exaggerating the problem, because we all exaggerate problems to make a case. But when you see it in black and white that 25 times a year, once a fortnight is spot on. And that's probably only the ones that actually stopped and reported it. And I'm really grateful to our two colleagues here for coming here and explaining the technical side of it and offering solutions. Could I first of all ask, could we please have this report sent to us? Could we see the slides so that we can study it at our leisure? Because I think that what we've heard this afternoon has to inform our approach to the conundrum we face about whether it should be the A5 or the A46 or some combination of the two that's improved. I think this information has to be fed into that discussion because it's been highlighted this afternoon. And I think we've got to focus in on the problem. We've heard a number of solutions: turnaround facilities, traffic lights, infrared beams, alternative A5, developer contributions, and education. And presumably, we are still thinking in terms of the chains, are we, that we see on the continent, where you hit the chains and you know a gantry. Presumably, that hasn't been ruled out. But if we I'm not too sure what happens now, but I'd like this report to go to be considered internally by ourselves as part of this A5, A46 process, and I wonder whether we could have a further report as these propositions are further considered by our colleagues here, so that we try to keep on top of this and try to move towards a solution.
Yeah, over to Blake, because I was Blake or Ian and Anne. I guess it is we need to sort of respond and
Yes, I was just going to chip into the whole debate, and there we have it. Mr. Bill's saying we can all exaggerate from time to time. That's a great deal of humility. But I happen to agree on this particular issue, and I just wondered, is there a case for the Highways Department at this authority to take on further powers or responsibilities from the Highways Agency via some form of DFT devolution or something in this respect? Because we've heard a lot of frustration about a lack of answers, and whilst some of our reports sometimes are unhelpful, I do think we give answers, whether people like it or not, and at the moment I'm still a little bit hazy as to what the answers are here, and I was wondering whether we could put it to our representatives at Highways England whether there's a case for devolution of these responsibilities over to us.
Well, we'll put it over to Anne and the department. I guess the question is going to be, we're going to be coming to ask you for a few bob. Is that all right? So, so you know, get your wallets out. You won't get out of here, by the way, because I'll be standing at the door. We'll take you. Okay, I'm sure. I'm sure. Sorry. Which one? Sorry, Anne. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Just to Mr. Bill's point there about a report coming back on this one. I mean, I think more than, and I'm sure our colleagues here will be more than happy to come back and talk to us in terms of any developments and what can or can't be done, etc. over time. The wider thing about the E46 and the E5, they're separate pieces of work, but you're absolutely right. In terms of any case that needs to be made, which is the work which Mr. Bill well knows about the E46 is looking at in terms of feasibility for various options around Leicester, you have to take into account what cost of upgrading existing would be versus new. That's a separate exercise, but you know, that very much is within the remit of not looking at the E5, but that principle for the E46 is applied to the work that's being done there. But separate matter to ongoing scrutiny and understanding of what's happening to this bridge issue in the E5. Final point I would say, and while I fully, you know, understand where Mr. Payne is coming from there, sometimes I would just say watch what you wish for, because what we'd be talking about there is detrunking. So obviously with detrunking comes the full responsibility for the full length of the E5, etc., which is a whole different ballgame.
So it was a bridge too far.
Leave it there. It certainly was from my perspective.
Okay, no, any more questions, then we move on. Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Graham Compton, Senior Traffic Management Officer for Leicestershire Police. I've not got time to go through the whole of my report now.
Can I just say we've got a number of members have to leave. There's a function.
Yeah.
So be brief.
Thank you. I'm not going to wade through it, but just picking up Councillor Bill's point, I've put a report in from the police perspective, and please put that with the other documents so you can have a look at it. I'm well aware of the problems in Hinckley and at Nuneaton. What I wanted to say today was this is a joined up approach as far as we're concerned. I'm well in touch with Network Rail, with Highways England and Warwickshire Police. But just picking up your point, you're correct. There's no easy solution to this. And included in this report is a section on legislation, just so everybody knows. Lorries are all notified to the police and the local authorities and Highways England when they're over certain dimensions and moving about on the roads. It doesn't apply to height. And the reason it doesn't is because a lot of the bridges are very, very low. And if it applied to height, we'd be suffering tens of thousands of notifications every week. So whilst I would like to say, on your point, that yes, we can go for legislation through the DFT, unfortunately it's been looked at and it's not a possibility. So what we've got to look at are the other options, and basically that's where we're coming from in terms of education, in terms of the foreign drivers, as one of the councillors mentioned, in terms of getting the message across to hauliers to get these lorries measured when they start out on the journey, and also to check the route. All this is in train now and is happening. From a police perspective, we are very proactive across the whole of the region, including Warwickshire. We meet regularly. This item is standing on our agenda to look at. When there is a bridge strike on the A5, it's always a grade 1 response by the police, by Leicestershire Police and Warwickshire. It's top priority. I've looked at the 18 and 19 strikes in the last year. they've all been dealt with expeditiously. I know that's probably not that much comfort to local councillors, but they've been dealt with expeditiously. The actual removal of the lorries and load over the last year have been done very, very quickly and efficiently. So the recovery operators who deal with this are all in the loop, and we've not got a problem on that site. So that is one slight positive in an area which is basically there's a lot of negatives. So from a police perspective, yes, we'll carry on doing the liaison. Please have a look at my report, and if we can help at all in this arena, then we'll continue to do so. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you very
Chairman.
much, Graham. I know Graham's reported a number of times. Very good.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you, David. I'd like to thank Mark, Malcolm and Graham for their contribution. It's really appreciated. And thank you, and I'm sure we'll see you again when we start trying to solve more problems in the future. Thank you very much. Next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now on to agenda item 13. And this is the next item is the North and East Melton Mowbray Distributor Road. It's the planning application, page 5560 on your agenda. I would like to ask Ian again some feedback. You're doing well today, Ian. And
Thank you, Chair. And the last thing, hopefully you'll hear from me for a while on this. Just quickly, this has been to members a number of times, so I won't dwell too much on the details in the report. But I'm pleased to say, following an extensive consultation exercise into the planning application for the delivery of the Northern and Eastern Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, on the 23rd of May, the Development Control and Regulatory Board here at Leicestershire County Council considered the application and gave permission subject to various conditions, as we were expecting, covering both environmental and construction matters as well as many others. The Council is having to forward fund around £14 million towards the cost of the £63.5 million scheme, and work continues with our discussions with Melton Borough Council about funding arrangements to secure those monies and seeing that they're recouped from developments coming in the area. Work will continue on the statutory orders, land purchase and completion, with the full business case hopefully being considered and back to ourselves by early 2020, with works commencing prelim-wise in early 2020 as well. If we are successful in our HIF bid and we still have no response formally yet, or informally into that matter, from Homes England, we would expect that the delivery of the southern section of the road, subject to various agreements, would then come into this programme and be delivered as much as possible at the same time. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Max.
Thank you, Chair. It's not usual for projects of this size, 63.5 million, to go ahead before all the money is secured. And obviously I'm referring to the £14 million shortfall that we can't. Now, just to explain to those who perhaps haven't had a chance to discuss this earlier, we're dependent on that £40 million flowing through over a period of time from 2020 onwards, from a number of for a number of different developers, and that is one risk. But I understand that another risk is that developers might want to understate what the expectation is, because viability plays into everything with developers. In other words, their profit margin. So my question really is, what's the chance of not getting the £14 million as expected due to viability claims? Or what chance is there that other developers who are not yet bought into the development will fail to pay up the expected amount? It seems to me that there is a considerable risk here. And allied to that, is it the case that because of the accepted difficulty of matching government funds time-wise with developer funds, which I know is difficult, is this a common situation? Has it happened before? Does it happen, for example, with the A512 £10 million expected from developers in Loughborough? Because I think members ought to be aware of the risks, the financial risks in these sort of projects. We don't normally do this, do we? We don't normally go ahead and say, hey, let's do this and we'll find the money later.
Thanks, Max. No, you brought an issue that's been and continue to be discussed at length. I'll hand over to, well, Ian's been involved, but it's a fair question, okay? So, Ian.
That's the one. Sorry about that. Folks, you may recall we brought a number of reports here which have detailed back the development of the distributor road and the transport strategy in Melton, and the cabinet reports had been taken that said in order for development to happen, which is normal in an area, a great deal of increase, and I think it was referred to as the pain, until the infrastructure is brought in place, and that could happen over many years. The opportunity we have in Melton and other sites is with a small amount of the scheme cost being forward funded by ourselves, the money and the infrastructure comes forward before the development, so you don't suffer that pain in areas. We are already collecting Section 106 contributions in the Melton area towards specifically the road, and we have over £7 million secured through Section 106s already, and a number of developments are going through in Melton, so we are confident that the money will come forward to pay for those. However, viability on developments, as members will be aware, is not just about roads, it's about other infrastructure such as schools and various other matters. However, part of any local plan development is to ensure there's viability. Often it can be about forward funding because of the financial cost and when the contributions from selling the houses come in that the developers can struggle with. But each situation is different. The situations we now deliver in are multi-layered. So you mentioned Junction 23, where we can have what we're trying to do as well as what developers and other people are trying to deliver in an area, including Highways England. So you have a multi-layered financial arrangement where if you can and deliver it all in one go, you can make considerable savings as well. Sometimes, and that's where Leicestershire County Council is looking to step in at times, is to forward fund that so we can deliver, but we are trying to make securing of that funding so it comes back to the people of Leicestershire with our delivery partners such as the district councils.
Before I go back to Max, he's put his hand up again, I also gather that the time, the planning, the time of this, we've considerably shortened it from so many years to 3 or 4, isn't it? So there's been a quite considerable change in it.
Approximately half, Chair.
Half the time. Max again?
The officer said that £7 million has been secured. Well, it hasn't been secured in terms of time. We don't know when we're going to get that. And I'm not sure if that's been signed off. There's a statement here which says that there are agreements for £7.4 million, 106 agreements. My question was, what's the risk of not getting the full amount? And I presume we can measure that risk on past performance with developers in some way. And what's the risk of other developers not coming in to pay what's expected of them?
Okay. Well,
but have we got agreements on this? I mean, they signed off?
We've signed some off, I think, haven't we? So, and then I will.
Yes, so the Section 106s are signed with the developments, and those developments are now moving ahead. For the £7 million of those secured with various triggers on when the housing is delivered. So you're correct, there is a risk, but when you look at the housing and what's coming forward in the market in Melton, that risk is considered low and acceptable. The agreements we're looking to have in place with, such as the District Council, is if mitigating that risk, if it doesn't come forward for any reason or takes longer, how will that be shared between ourselves and the District Council? But that's almost the fallback position on a one that we know is progressing well anyway. As you can imagine, a great deal of scrutiny goes into that risk before our Section 151 officer will sign off on any of this going forward, and a report will be going to Cabinet giving authority for that as well. It's a very carefully considered strategy.
Yeah, just to add to it, Max, as well, of course, from a district point of view, the planning department, the members involved in that have been briefed. They're fully aware now. It's obvious how we're very alert to what's going on. I know you're not saying. I'm not suggesting that, Max. We are fully informed, but what we have is district members that are fully briefed. They understand the situation, and we're on top of it in a number of ways, Max.
Yeah, just to add, I can see there's a risk. I mean, I've spoken before about some of the bids we put in for grants. They are speculative. We invest hundreds of thousands of pounds in building business cases up to meet a window of opportunity that the government puts forward with one of their grant pots, and sometimes those bids don't come to fruition. So there's a risk to that, and equally, although we're at a rather advanced stage with regards to the Melton distributor road, there is a risk, as Max has quite correctly pointed out. One thing I would say from the Cabinet perspective, recently at one of our recent meetings, we've approved a motion to build a growth hub within the under the Chief Executive's department. Again, for reasons that have been suggested by the Assistant Director, infrastructure is wide. It's not just about roads, although we have speculated that we need about £600 million in the next 25 years. 400 million will go directly into transport and road infrastructure to accommodate the growth within Leicestershire. But we recognise there's significant risks, not only financial risk to the authority, but the risk of delivery for the benefit of Leicestershire, which is why we have put this proposal forward to build a growth hub to try and mitigate some of those risks involved.
Paul?
Just very briefly, just an observation really. A lot of investments going into Melton, and in any area a developer's going to look at the viability of a scheme, but also the area, what investment's going into that area. And if the developers are seeing that investment going in, that the community of Melton, if you like, its well-being, I hope, is being elevated, then it's becoming a more attractive place for purchases of homes. So a developer will be keen. So I think what I've heard demonstrates more on the side that the risk is lower than high, I would suggest.
And in fact, if you read your papers, you'll see that the funds that and money that it will bring in to not just Melton's economy, but the through economy that goes through Melton is quite considerable in regard to the capital costs. It's quite astronomical that we can make. So there's risk in everything. So minimal and some bigger risks. So, but Max, it's really appreciated. Is that it? Shall we move on to the next agenda? I think. Okay, thank you. Yes, I realise you've got to go tonight, and also I know there's a number of you got functions tonight. By all might, reply, Max.
Okay. I think Paul, as always, makes a valid point, but if you're building a distributor road round a town, you're actually taking business out of the town, actually, to a certain extent. So there are swings and roundabouts, but I've said plenty on this.
Not in our case in the research, I'm afraid to say. I live in Melton, and that is not the case. But we'll talk outside. Okay. Next agenda item is 14. Potential transfer of part of the Ashby canal. That's 6172 in your pack. Anne's going to respond to this. Welcome to Ms. Sheena. It was late notice, but I'm more than happy to see you present, sir. It's always good to see you around the table. And this has been going on a number of years. Believe it or not, I'm a fan of canals. I used to play around them as a kid. I think they're brilliant. It's one of our national treasures. Some of them are in great condition, some not so good. So this is an interesting project. Over to you. I think we go to Ms. Sheena. You'd like to say a few words?
So, yeah, I'm happy to do that. Chairman, members, it has been going on a long time, and as many of us will know, the restoration of the Ashby Canal into Measham is widely acknowledged to be the key to the regeneration of this former North West Leicestershire mining village, which still contains substantial pockets of deprivation. The most recent section of canal near Snareston was restored in around 2015 using UK coal money under a Section 106 agreement on the nearby open cast mine. That gave us about 700 metres of canal and a bridge at a cost of around £1 million. Completing the restoration into Measham requires anything up to a further £15 million. About £3 million would come as part of a development of 450 houses in Measham. That would give us the canal basin and an attractive wharfside development in the centre of the village. And the latest position on that is set out in paragraph 8 of the report. Now, to carry forward the momentum of the progress made in 2015, the various supporters of the Ashby Canal restoration decided to step up the effort on fundraising. Ashby Canal Association has raised about £200,000 for an aqueduct over the Gillowiska Brook, which is tremendous. But compared to the £12 million we need to bring the canal into Measham, £200,000 is a drop in the ocean, or the canal for that matter. As discussions progressed, it gradually became clear that Leicestershire County Council were no longer in the best position to fulfil the role of the lead agency on fundraising. By and by, the idea emerged of vesting the land for the canal route in a suitable voluntary organisation to put them in a prime position to make applications for larger grants. The Ashby Canal Association are well established and have supported the canal restoration over many, many years. There are no doubts in my mind over their commitment to the canal. The one question I have is whether they have the capacity to sustain a major fundraising effort for a large project over a long period. I would not want the County Council, therefore, to think they can walk away and just leave a group of volunteers to get on with it. This council needs to continue to support the ACA and the Ashby Canal Trust to deliver on the project. And I think it's regrettable that the County Council appear not to have appointed a member representative to the ACT this year, and I would urge the Cabinet to reconsider that. I'm also uncertain whether the County Council has decided to withdraw from the Ashby Canal Forum. Furthermore, I would ask that any unresolved issues on the ownership of canal land not under consideration for transfer, for example, the water supply lake owned by Harworth Estates, and plots 21, 21A, 23 and 23A owned by Measham Parish Council are dealt with as quickly as possible so we can get those issues done and out of the way. They don't hold anything up. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Anne, and then we'll go to Max. Sorry, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Unless Ian fancies having a go at this one. I'd like to thank Councillor Sheehan. I think, there are a number of detailed things in terms of specifics, and I'm very conscious of time, and I'm happy for us to have a conversation after the committee around some of those, for example, around where we are with some of the plots of land that are still outstanding, some of those technical things, which I can just reassure in terms of the report I'm about to cover. They sit outside of the scope of the proposed transfer, so they don't hold it up. But I would agree, the Ashby Canal Association have a long history, very dedicated, along with other partners. So I acknowledge all of that. But certainly on the trust, the forum, we could talk about that outside of committee. In terms of the report itself, through you, Chair, I was just going to sort of add in terms of context, though I think it's already been really well articulated. The County Council has been involved with the communities and the local groups in that part of the county to restore the canal for a good 25 years. And it goes way beyond that into its history when the coal board extracted itself from that part of the county. It's a valuable scheme which the County Council will remain committed to, but will require innovative thinking about how we take forward the restoration in the current climate, which we know requires resource, and we have limited resource in terms of officer time to attach a lead role to it. With that in mind, the purpose of the report is to seek Scrutiny's views on what I think is an innovative approach, certainly in legal terms, around the potential transfer to the Ashby Canal Association of some land and powers which we were granted under a Transport and Works Act order back in 2004, that we novate those across to the ACA to restore part of the Ashby Canal. Paragraphs 4 to 12 of the report set out the history, the context and the proposal itself, including the need, if it's approved later this year, to apply to DEFRA for consent. In this section, it also highlights what falls in and out of scope regarding a possible transfer to the ACA of the section between Snareston and Measham. There are other sections of canal that the County Council will still be committed to, and they are less well developed. If it helps, there's a map at Appendix B on page 69 of your pack. We are currently involved in a 6-week public consultation which started on the 9th of May, and it allows for other organisations other than the ACA to come forward if they so wished, and it also encourages views from the public on the proposal. The report from point 15 does outline resources and legal issues associated with the proposal, and I won't go through those verbatim, but they include things like land values, possible transitional support payments, which was touched on earlier, and future insurances that the County Council might require. And legally, it summarises some external QC's council's opinion that we had to secure because there is a long legacy of legal issues. So it's very complex, but they are covered and highlighted in the report. There is some additional information appended to the report outlining what DEFRA would want to see from any future application to transfer, as well as some more historic background information in Appendix C. So with that, Chair, obviously what we would welcome as officers is comments from this committee that we can add to the wider public consultation before we take a report to Cabinet in September for a final decision.
Thank you, Joe. Max? Max, they did ask previously. It wasn't they just walked away. They did ask me, and it was okay. Well, I'll check it. Okay. Have we stopped representing Joe? What is the situation? I know you mentioned officers' time and resources.
Chair, just for clarity, the member representation on the trust has been stepped down, and arguably that is agreed now, and it's appropriate because of the proposals that are set out in this report. That if we're transitioning a section of canal to another third party, we've stepped away from some of the management. However, we have officer representation, so we are still actively involved at a technical level, and officers attend the forum meetings, the trust meetings. In terms of the annual Ashby Canal Forum, you'll forgive me, I would have to go back and check with officers who deal with it on a day-to-day basis, but it is an annual meeting, and Sean used to chair it. And I could look into when last it was hosted. It's not a huge issue to host and pull together all the partners. It's whether it's appropriate for us to do that when we don't have a member sitting on the forum.
John?
2017, I was the local member rep, and then it was thought more appropriate for it to be a member of the executive cabinet rather, or one of the member support officers. So Pam Posnett was the representative, and I think she resigned as a director in June of last year. So it's been about a year since we've had an official member rep. I attend the meetings of the ACT as an observer. I have no involvement with them. I'll be more than happy to return as a member rep if the county were happy to make it a local member responsibility again, which would be a logical thing if you're stepping down your involvement. I think you were stepping up your involvement in 2017. Now you're stepping down. It could revert to being a member rep appointment. I'll be quite happy to take that position.
Any comments on that, Anne, Blake?
Just look, I mean, that would be an executive, if you like, decision in terms of outside body representation. So it's not one that could be made right here or, considered here. What I will say is, lead member, you'll recall around about 2018, 17-18, the leader wished to put together the Environment and Transport Department again. Previously there was an environment lead member, there was a highways, myself, lead member. That has now been put together following the death of Ernie White and the vacancy that came up on the cabinet. The department, as you'll see in front of you, is quite wide in terms of its responsibilities. We have highways operations, we have environmental concerns, we have development management control, and we have a whole growth agenda and transition agenda, transformation agenda, which is led by the director. And along with that, there are numerous outside bodies that need to be serviced by the department and the membership of the department, which I'm heavily involved in. So of course, any consideration with regards to membership of any other outside body, including the Ashby Canal, would have to be considered, in context of other considerations. So it's not something that I can engage with right now. All I can say is we'll take that back to the leader. But I think, given what Joe's just mentioned, the Assistant Director for Environment, in terms of novating some land and, if you like, some of the current, responsibilities beholden to the county council over to this third party, I'm not sure whether it would be wise to have member representation when we're actually novating, some of our contractual, responsibilities. Yeah.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As one of the local county councillors cited in the report, I do welcome the move by the county. I think it's first class. I live in Ashby. It's got its name, the canal, the Ashby Canal. And I think the idea of what it could happen in Measham, if this is able to go forward, would be tremendous boost to the area. And it's beginning to evolve as a leisure type with other areas associated to leisure and cycle ride and walking. You know, it is the future to be able to do this, and I think it's a brilliant move from this authority, Mr. Chairman. I listened to Sean's other bits of information flowing and the wheeling dealing on how we get representation, everything else. I'm not going to comment on that because I have no expertise on it, and I don't know how we've already had this is direct talk about the legality if they're handing over and then they're trying to come back in again. I don't know what the legal scenario is, all that, but I absolutely welcome this. Is first class, and I hope that it is going to be successful and the future funding scenarios and efforts are going to be successful and we can see this completed. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Sean?
I just want to be clear that the land transfer is to the Ashby Canal Association. The representation has been on the Ashby Canal Trust, quite a separate body, even though you see the same people at some of the meetings. But it's not as if you're transferring the land to one body and then plonking a member representative on there. It's another body altogether. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Sean. We'll follow that through and just get an answer for Sean. I think that's fair. Paul?
Maybe something for the leader to consider. I mean, personally, I'm coopted into Foxton Locks partnership. I don't know if that's a very similar thing to what was being discussed, but that might be something that wants to be considered in discussions with the leader. There might be some parity with it. I don't know.
Blake?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Foxton Locks partnership because their objective is to restore the inclined plane, and as the division councillor for Harborough West, which you have now taken over, I wasn't involved as a county councillor. I was involved actually as a district councillor as the ward representative. The county council did offer representation, but they have wholly different objectives. I think with regards to the Foxton inclined plane, I think the conclusion was, and this was many years ago, the funding just did not exist to see the objectives of the organisation through. So it kind of petered out, and naturally a lot of these outside body organisations, when the project peters, so does the representation. This is slightly different in that a lot of time has been invested by the county council over many, many years, even to get the works order that's already been discussed by the assistant director. It is a project that has a huge amount of support locally. I know that you've heard about the passions about the canal, but it is the case that we are limited now as a county council as to what we can do, but we think there is an opportunity, albeit in time, and I don't have any idea of how long it will take, but I think there is a possibility if we follow this strategy by novating our interest, and it is an innovative approach. I've been briefed that it's an unusual circumstance that we find ourselves in, and consequently we do need the support of government to foresee this. But if we do novate and move forward on this basis, I think the project stands the best chance of being delivered.
Thank you, Sean. That was appreciated, and let's keep moving forward on it because canals are great things. Okay, God bless you. Last agenda item, which is agenda 15. This is to do with everybody take a deep breath.
No, that's worse than the last one.
Sorry, well, no, it's important. This is the clean air strategy, and we've got Rob here. How are you, Rob? Looking very well. So I'd like to welcome Rob, a public health consultant. We've received in your document some information from Dr. Feltham as chair of the Health and Overview. Can I just say that's just a comment to be read, not necessarily to discuss. It was just some comments. I think we need to talk about the strategy for the whole of Leicestershire, and I think we will agree with that in the briefings. So I hand over to Anne first to lead the role on this, and we've got Rob who will ably support the comments, and I'm sure you can answer our questions when we get to there.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief, bearing in mind the time. The report itself summarises the government's clean air strategy. And what it does in the report is, because you'll appreciate the strategy itself is quite comprehensive and covers a whole host of areas, but we in the report have focused on the health, the highways and transport, the environment and the health aspects of that and the possible implications for LCC. As you've already mentioned, Chair, we've got Rob Howard here from Public Health to answer any health-related, from the health perspective. To set the current context of who does what, I'm sure members are very aware of this, but just to remind you, district councils are responsible for air quality management. However, where it's identified that a county function is involved, i.e. something like highways, for instance, we have a duty as a county to identify and seek funding to mitigate as part of any air quality management plan that is overseen and owned by the district authorities, where that is possible. The Director of Public Health has a duty to ensure plans are in place to protect the health of the local population. And just, these things mustn't be seen in isolation, and I'm sure this committee will not, but it links very much, this strategy has got a link very much with the government's industrial strategy, clean growth strategy, the DFT's Road to Zero strategy, and the government's 25-year environment plan, a whole host, a plethora of things coming at us there, but, air quality has a role across all of those. The CAS itself, its objectives are to drive down national emissions of pollutants, reduce background pollution and minimise human exposure to harmful concentrations of pollution. Within the strategy, the government commits to introducing strengthened legislative framework, which I think we would all welcome, for tackling air pollution this year. So, that's something we're looking for. It's not come out yet, but, we'll need to wait and see how far that's going to go to take us and what other powers we might gain to help us to tackle some of the issues that we're grappling with. Main sources of air pollution are transport, road, rail and air, non-road mobile machinery. I'm not quite sure what's behind that, so please don't ask me, but non-road mobile machinery, industry, domestic, agricultural and shipping. Now some of those obviously we have more of an influence over than others as a county council. If I look at those particular topic areas I outlined to begin with, in terms of the health impacts, air pollution is a major health risk, and current estimates are between 28,000 and 35,000 people die prematurely because of air quality related issues. But to put it in a local context for Leicestershire, paragraph 27 shows that particulate matter is up there in terms of the numbers of deaths with alcohol and excess winter deaths that we unfortunately see happening in Leicestershire. So it is a major issue for us. Air quality also significantly impacts on quality of life, and I think one thing that maybe we don't often associate it with, but I'm sure Rob does, but maybe me and my role don't often, is health inequality. For instance, you could be more impacted in some of our deprived areas, i.e. major roads going through some of our more deprived communities, and actually air quality or poor air quality has a far greater impact on those communities. The county itself has 14 air quality management areas, and they are appended as part of the report for your information. And examples of what's being done to deal with air pollution from the health perspectives are given in paragraph 33 of the report, and what the strategy itself commits to is in paragraph 34. In terms of transport, the strategy puts a real focus on this, given that 80% of nitrogen dioxide emissions are from road transport. What the government's doing about that, which is highlighted in the strategy, is rolling out clean air zones. Leicester is very involved in this, and we're working with them to modelling that and to understand what they can do. They have their Transforming Cities Fund, of which one strand is about tackling air quality. They're investing more in cycling and walking, and we benefit from that, the likes of funding for bikeability. Our Access Fund project we do jointly with the city. And more widely, you'll be aware of government requirements to do with petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040, and those, what do you call those? No more of those by 2040. I can't think of the right one. A requirement there isn't any more petrol or diesel vehicles by 2040. In terms of our own activities, we, as this committee will well know, we support sustainable transport through our development management function when we're responding to the district councils and planning applications, where we can include in our new schemes, and you've heard about some of our schemes today. Travel planning work with schools and businesses, choose how you move branding and website and support that there is, you'll be aware of through our internet, and such things as the Access Fund project. As has been acknowledged, however, by some of the sector feedback to the strategy itself to government, there is concern that the effectiveness of the proposed actions to tackle the transport dimension of air quality, we're placing a lot, it seems to be placing a lot of responsibilities on local authorities without the necessary tools to support us to actually grapple with it and tackle it adequately. So something, again, we need to be looking for from that legislative framework later in the year. Government action and leadership, obviously a key element about air quality, that wider role. The strategy commits to the government to setting up an environment protection office following Brexit, which will hold government to account on air quality matters. It makes clear that local government structures don't actually help, the current structures don't always help us in tackling air quality, which is something I'm sure we'd all acknowledge around the table, and as such is proposing to ensure accountability sits with the right level of government, establishing lead authorities for specific aspects of air quality, requiring action plans, strengthening powers as well as providing guidance. Again, it's a waiting game. We need to see what that looks like in reality when that comes out. A few comments in conclusion. We welcome the Clean Air Strategy. We recognise, however, I think that there does seem to be a bit of an imbalance between maybe the resources that government at a national level are putting towards maybe the growth agenda, housing, etc., compared to what might be going into or we might expect coming forward for air quality, given the enormity of the task to tackle some of the issues that the report highlights for you there. Public health role, and I'm sure Rob will say more about this after your questions, is becoming more and more important. And we do have locally, we have the Leicestershire Air Quality and Health Partnership Action Plan, which has been implemented with relevant bodies to look at it specifically from the health perspective. And while this report focuses on, our Department of Public Health's real interests and abilities to effect change in this area, paragraph 73 of the report gives an overview of some of the wider county council initiatives going on. I'll just conclude by saying I don't think we can underestimate how challenging this agenda will be to effectively tackle, particularly in the short term. Just a quick example, without some real legislative change, our effectiveness will be limited. And an example, as a highway consultee to the planning process, we do not have the ability to recommend a refusal of a development on the basis of air quality. So, that in theory could be considered, it should be a key consideration, but there is nothing under which we could then make that comment. So hopefully legislation may come along to assist in some of these areas. My final point, and Rob's the expert on this, the County Council is running a Clean Air Day on the 20th of June, and it's seeking pledges from all of us as individuals, officers and members to do something specifically on that day to help improve air quality, car share, get the bus, whatever. Rob will give you more ideas.
What day of the week is it?
It's a Thursday, but equally, this is all about behaviour change. This is about behaviour change, and it's about what can we do in our ongoing behaviour to all of us help our air quality as well. So I'll leave you with that final thought.
Thank you. Rob, have you got some comments?
Just to confirm, it's a really significant public health issue and a priority for public health. It's really gone up the agenda nationally and locally over the last few years. But I'd just say to you, if we say that it contributes to 30,000 deaths a year nationally, if we said that there were 30,000 deaths due to poor water quality, I think there might be significantly more traction and interest. But because it is this almost literally invisible problem, and it's also a very complex problem, it perhaps doesn't get the traction it needs. And I'm really pleased that we are working together across departments with our comms colleagues, environment, transport, public health, and with districts and Public Health England and others to look at what we can do better together to tackle this problem.
Before I pass on, I was in a London project a number of years ago. There was a school we were working with that was actually located on M4, A4 and the actual detrimental impact of the children's health, mental health, was quite frightening. So it is a subject we need to talk about and continually challenge, Max.
Thanks, Chair. This is a very challenging report, and the question is whether we're up for the challenge in Leicestershire or not. But before that, I'd just like to thank Kevin Felton for bringing forward his note, which I found very informative on its own right, and I'm sure it will go forward to the right place, and the tarmac will be going down soon now. Anyway, I really find this a depressing report because it's all about the problems, and finish it up, we have to have a degree of reality without being very sure of what we can do without apparently government help. When funds are cut short in other areas, we know about this, in terms of adult social care, in terms of child protection. What do? We remodel the service. We get on and deliver the service in new ways. And I know in many cases that means that they're reduced services or the criteria are modelled, but we don't seem to have any effort to remodel our service in this respect. And that's important because on paragraph 24, it talks about, just read it because it's quite significant. The main source of air pollution are road transport. Paragraph 44, the government's identified the most immediate and urgent air quality challenge faced by the local authorities is to tackle the problem of NO2s around road transport. And yet we're still listening to officers talking about. If you look at the map on the back of you can see where all the PM pollutions are. How are you going to cycle down those routes? Where's the walking? Coming into that. And I appreciate, there are also problems in residential and town centres. In fact, there is a continuing problem in Loughborough. But that is not a solution, and in no way is that relevant to today's huge problem of road transport, to talk about bikes and walking. And I say this because this was thrown at me by one of the officers when we talked about the perspectives for growth. So we need to be much more realistic about remodelling if we look at paragraph 68, it talks about the strategic growth plan. We need to be far more realistic about the challenge that we're up to. So there's lots of good intent. I won't finish on a negative note, and I'm very pleased to see that once again it's the second report we've had in a short time where public health is working closely with the Environment and Transport Department, and that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much.
Very briefly, Chair, I'm very pleased to see the report. I've been asking for something like this for quite a time, and we had a bit of discussion at the end of the last meeting, Mrs. Crothers and somebody else, about the effect of traffic on air pollution, and we had a slight disagreement about the cause of it, but the report bears out my argument. I look forward to seeing how this progresses. No doubt it'll come back on a regular basis, see how we're progressing with this. Twice a year, perhaps. It's a very important subject, so let's not push it in the back burner. Let's just keep it boiling along. Let's go something with it. And so I look forward to the first report, see how much we've improved in the first 6 months. Thank you,
Blake, and then you can respond. You responding to this, or okay, Dan?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to welcome this excellent report. It is very excellent, and it's got brilliant detail in. I have a real concern because Max was busy saying look at the area. Well, that's where I am, Ashby de la Zouche, northwest Leicestershire. but nobody there seems to understand, and this is my problem. How does the county communicate in planning? Water authority, your word is important in a planning application. What Anne said earlier on, if you were in charge of pollution, you could say whether it's viable or not. We clearly have an AQMM situation, and it's being denied. It's no problem. And yet any of us can go onto the DEFRA website, kilometre square, and you can see they're not using it. And I just don't know how to enforce it, yet they're happy to want to build more transport yards in Ashby and all the other problems and issues. It is really horrendous. Now, I'm in despair and meeting officers, and they say, well, their expert says it's fine. Their expert is a geologist by training. The gentleman who talks to me is a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. And people can see we're allowing people to walk along roads that are seriously dangerous. And yet nobody, I knock the doors, I talk to people, absolutely frustrated with this. It's there, you can see the danger areas. Max was talking about cycling. Well, people live in this area. People walk up and down. People go into shops in this area. And yet it is really, really serious. Some of the problems is undoubtedly the old lorries that haven't got really good quality cleaning systems on, which should probably be about 10,000 a truck, maybe, I don't know. It's expensive, but we've got to look, and I've come up with a solution in my mind that towns and villages, because my villages are the same as everybody else's villages, we're plagued with lorries cutting through and all sorts, is trying to find a system where we could say that lorries that wasn't using it as a shortcut, in other words, working the way through instead of probably going in a different direction, they're going the shortcuts through villages, through small towns, and they're adding massive pollution, these old lorries. And I didn't realise that the biggest concern is in the winter months, because when a lorry is cold and it ignites and starts, it's not warm enough to be able to destroy some of it, and it's coming out. And this is really, really dangerous for people's health. So this is great, it's wonderful, but how do we move forward? How can we talk to districts and say, this is serious, please take an account of it? And it's more than one district, but where I'm particularly involved in the north, it is absolutely bad. But how do you do it? Because an officer said it's not, and I'm not a competent officer, I'm a member, and you know, how do we get reality for people? Because if you're in denial, how are you going to address the situation? First of all, we have to accept where we are, then how can we do something about it? How do we divert trucks away from villages? And it will cost maybe £100 more delivery, but that's going to be the cost that somebody else is going to bear as part of trying to make a cleaner environment. Because what everybody's view is, it's the council or the government, but it's got to be an overall responsibility. We've all got to play our part in some way, and if trucks are moved into other main routes, which are established at the moment, I think that's going to help the smaller communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
James.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Again, looking at the map, it is very interesting. So thank you for that. Just first of all, wondering what the impact of the airport is on that. Is it a significant one? Is it a coincidence it's located close to the area that's worst in the county? And second of all, it's interesting as well that if I didn't know where the major roads in Leicestershire were and looked at this map, I could probably have a good guess at telling you, okay? And part of my thinking is clearly we've got to do something for right now, but in sort of the medium term, I suspect electric vehicles will become an increasingly important part of the nation's transport. And is that likely to see an impact if we were to look at this map in 20, 30 years will see the impact, obviously, that comes away from the roads when electric vehicles become more common?
Chairman, could I just very much welcome what's been said this afternoon, this report itself, and what's been said by everybody. Could I ask, is this going to come back in some form with a report on actions being taken so that we can monitor this? Because I think, like Dan, I think not only have we got to bring in districts, I think we have to take this upwards as well. This has to be a regional matter and a national matter as well. We can't just do it on our own. It has to, everybody has to work to a plan.
David, we've got to get this whole national thing. Paul.
Thank you, Chair.
There is a question.
It's just a question, and it's a question of scales. You've got this diagram here, which shows the yellow line of sulfur dioxide being very low, and then you've got this on the back, which is 9.8 to 14.6 on particulate matter. When you're comparing things, it's useful to have the same scale, and I'm not sure these two diagrams are at the same scale. Another question is, how was this map generated? Was it generated on the basis of the appendix about the air quality data from different parts of the county, or does the data feeding into that diagram come from somewhere else?
Off you go, Joe.
Sorry, so some of the reports, the tables, figure 1 on page 76, is my understanding is that's from within the document itself. So it's the government's report and it's their document. So whereas the one on page 96 is actually from our business intelligence team at the county council. So our ability to sort of we're adding local intel, whilst some, because the purpose of the report was to summarise the national document. So some of the ability to cross-reference exactly some of the correspondence is challenging in that context.
Can I come back on that? Why it's important is what is the national measure of sensitivity for the measurement of all these different particulates of nitrogen dioxide? Because if you're comparing, you have to compare like with like to get a clear conclusion. And I think it's not quite clear to me how those two images are comparable. That was only.
And through you, Chair, I'm not sure that I agree absolutely, but I'm not sure. I think the ambition wasn't necessarily to be able to, but it was to, because the criticism could be that the document in its entirety is simply a synopsis of a 200-page document. It is to try and add far more local information. But you are right, we are still waiting on the Environment Bill and any of the new targets so that we would be able to then monitor our local performance against that. Yes.
I can see where Paul's coming from. I think from a member's point of view, we are lobbied quite frequently about roads which are bearing a certain amount of pollution, and it's not clear from the document what the triggers are. There are obviously statutory limits, and it would be useful if officers could, perhaps not here now because it's late in the day and so on, if we could be informed of how to evidence and report highways that we feel are excessively polluted. I mean, Kevin Feltham has brought a case to us, and that's been pretty well researched locally. But we've all got areas in our divisions where we feel that perhaps it ought to be looked at. Is it a matter of going to districts and asking them, and it being up to the district to decide? I'm already getting a nod from Ian, so he's well ahead of this. Perhaps you could put it on record for the webcast. Thank you.
There's quite a lot of information and questions, but I just wanted to give a couple of bits of information. One is that we're just about to complete a chapter for the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment on air quality for Leicestershire. There's a lot of work been done by our data analysts on this, and hopefully that will answer quite a lot of the questions around some of the detail around some of the particulates and nitrous oxides and so on. There's also lots of other information held on district council websites around those particular air quality issues as well. So with the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment chapter will also have a series of recommendations around how to take this work forward. And as mentioned, we've established this partnership, which is for action around air quality and health, which will have members of the County Council, Communications, Environment Transport, Public Health, District Councils, Public Health England, the University of Leicester that's doing some interesting research around this, so that we can all come together to look at the actions that we need to take together, because this is one of these issues that we need to work together on. Some of that will be around active travel. I mean, there is something like 70% of journeys are under 5 miles, and car journeys rather are under 5 miles. And so some of it is around making sustainable active travel options easier for people. There's also huge spin-off benefits to that in terms of physical activity levels and obesity and so on as well. And some of it will be around technology and regulation. So it's going to be a fairly broad action plan. Some of it is about leadership and vision. But I'd be very happy to come back once that action plan is launched with the JSNA chapter and with the action plan and discuss that further with this committee.
We talk with Blake. Could we just? I've seen something on Twitter about the LCC £5,000 grants for clean air or environment. Did you see it? Some funding or grant?
There are numerous grants.
Okay. The more we get those out to the local population, because I'm sure some of the groups all over Leicester would like to apply and make a difference. Over to you, Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I do, I think Director and Carruthers might just answer some of the direct questions that have been raised, and then I will follow on from that.
Okay, over to you, Anne.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of points in passing. The question about East Midlands Airport, obviously that diagram was about particulate matter. So any particular matter in that area that comes from East Midlands Airport will actually be captured within that data as well. Obviously they'll be measured for a whole host of different, pollutants, etc. The comment about electric cars in the future, etc. Part of this, and as the conversation has shown how complex an issue this will be to deal with, and I think Rob has articulated it very well. My view is there's a whole host of different aspects and themes we're going to have to tackle this on. One is the legislative framework. 2 is a behaviour change thing, because actually it's just saying 70% of journeys by car under 5 miles. Well, that doesn't make sense if you're. How do we then move people to something different, which is part of the whole clean air day we mentioned earlier? But then how do we make that sustainable and embed that in people's lifestyles? How do we all operate differently? And the other aspect is technology. Technology is changing at a phenomenal rate. And it was really interesting for me when the government's climate change panel came out with their response. Probably about a month ago now. The headlines on that, one of the headlines was, while road transport is one of the big pollutants, actually you don't really have to, they didn't quite say the words, you don't really have to worry about it, but they were saying technology will take care of that. Now that doesn't mean we rest on our laurels and wait till 2040 or whatever year, but technology is the ability to, we can still have the movements we want. Because Max is absolutely right. We can't say to people, if you do a journey down the M1 every day, can you do it by bike? That's just not, it's unreal. It doesn't work. People, and we can't say to people, you can't travel anymore, because you can't go back to, 100 years ago when people didn't go more than 10 miles, around their community, etc. Technology will have a big element to play in some of that, so you're absolutely right in that point. And it was interesting that the government's headline actually encaptured some of that. So we'll need to harness, I think, various pronged attack to try and tackle some of these things here. I'm going to stop.
Okay, so finally, look, we all recognise the environment. Clean air strategy as a part of that is one of the most challenging, serious issues that we all face nationally. I'd argue that Leicestershire County Council are doing more than most. I've said it before in previous debates. We've put about £30 million into street lighting projects, which has reduced our carbon emissions. We've set £5 million aside for ash dieback, which includes replanting of trees. We've looked at the county council property, and about 17 to £20 million have been put into, energy, biomass facilities, solar panels on the roof. Collectively, it's reduced our carbon emissions by 69%. There's still a huge amount to do. What I would argue is, and just put some perspective on this, it was asked through your forward planning group, Chairman, to put this on the agenda. And what you've got before you is a snapshot of the government's clean air strategy. Now, we had a previous discussion about pedestrian crossings and why it is that we can't put crossings into localities. Well, we're guided by guidance and directives and legislation, and the same's true here. We're all desperate to get on and do more, much, much more, but we have to be guided by government and, the policies that they employ. This is a strategy, and I'd argue, along with the environment strategy that's been released by government, this clean air strategy, the waste and resources strategy, these are soon to be acts of Parliament as well. This government's doing a huge amount to not only recognise the threat caused by climate change, but that the country needs to do more. We have to play up. Okay, can I finish, Max? I didn't interrupt anybody else, please. No, it's not a political edge. I said I would argue. My personal opinion is the government are doing a lot. We recognise, and I think we can demonstrate we're doing a lot locally. But the truth is, we're going to have to work out on a case-by-case basis how we approach some of these issues. We have a list of air quality management areas which we know about. But one of the issues, and I'm going to say it, is the fragmented, if you like, responsibilities into identifying the issue, who's responsible for putting plans together, and how we respond to that. And a lot of the information, the data we've asked for, is at district council level. I led a district council. I'm very familiar with the Kibworth air quality issue because I was very much a part of getting that monitored and making sure that the district council set a plan out. But I think the plan could include a lot more through maybe consultants as to how we go about tackling some of these issues. And once we have a clear blueprint as to tackle on a case-by-case basis some of these issues, we'll be in a better position to bid for the resources, etc., to deliver some of the solutions. So it's a really complex issue. We're all passionate about it. We desperately want to see more done. And I think this is a good start in recognising where we sit in the scheme of things and what we're able or not able to do in context of where we are. That's all I have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. I could say something, but I think we need to move on now. It's been a long but a very enjoyable, informative meeting. I do appreciate you staying. I will make a comment about people leaving, Max. I do appreciate that. No, you've got every right to say that, and I will bring that up at another meeting outside of this. But I'd like to thank Rob and all the officers for really making a meeting. We had lots of petitions, and I think we handled it very well as all of us together. It was quite emotive sometimes, and it's very, very special when we can bring the public in, and I like that, and that's, to me, good democracy. We give them an opportunity to meet with us, sit with us, and say their piece. And I think that's, and the representatives from members here for their residents. So dates of the next meeting, well, it's still going to be 2 p.m. You've got the dates there: 5th of September, 7th of November, 16th of January, 5th of March, 4th of June, 5th of September, 5th of November. So I don't think there's any other items. The meeting is closed. Have a safe journey home, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.